Part 1. The setup expanded. The cheap Pinot Grigio was practically burning a hole through my stomach lining. But hey, it was Wine and Wine Wednesday, and a girl's gotta commit. My apartment was small, cluttered with half-finished art projects and overflowing bookshelves, but it felt cozy enough on nights like these, the fairy lights strung across the window casting a soft, forgiving glow. The laptop screen illuminated my face with an unflattering bluish light, reflecting the chaos of our group call. Chloe, bless her heart, was mid-rant about her boss again, while Noah was busy showing off his sourdough starter like it was a newborn baby. Typical. Then there was Liam. He was laughing, that easy, carefree laugh that made my stomach do a weird flip-flop thing, even though I knew I shouldn't let it. He was sitting in what looked like the back of his vintage car, a string of Edison lights twinkling in the background. The topic, as it often did, had drifted to dating. The digital graveyard of dead-end dates and ghosting horror stories that plagued our generation. Noah was complaining about the impossible standards on dating apps. Chloe was detailing another disastrous encounter with a guy who thought mansplaining was a flirting technique. Then it was Liam's turn. He'd just ended what he called a situationship, a term that always sounded vaguely depressing to me. He sighed dramatically, running a hand through his perpetually messy brown hair. He laughed during a group call with friends and said, "She's not ugly, she's just artistically challenged," which earned him a collective groan from Chloe and a sarcastic, "Oh, very mature" Liam from Noah. I stayed quiet, swirling the ruby-tinged remains of my wine in the glass. Liam's comments stirred something deeply uncomfortable in me, a prickling sensation under my skin. It wasn't about her, whoever she was, though I did feel a twinge of sympathy for the unknown girl. It was about him. About the casually dismissive way he often treated women, a pattern I'd observed for years. He possessed this disarming, effortless charm, the kind that made girls swoon and write his name in their notebooks. I'd been guilty of this once or twice back in college, but underneath there was often this detached quality. Like he didn't really see them or value them, beyond the initial spark of attraction. He seemed to think they were just expendable. I knew I shouldn't care. Logically, rationally, I understood that his dating life was his business and he was just a friend. Just a friend. But the truth was I did care. Way more than I probably should. I couldn't help the way my heart skipped a beat when he looked at me, or the small, foolish hope that flickered inside me whenever he called. He was witty, undeniably handsome, and genuinely funny. But he was also infuriating, oblivious, and possibly emotionally stunted. Chloe, ever the peacemaker and skilled deflector, saw the tightening in my jaw and quickly steered the conversation towards the upcoming Friendsgiving we were planning. We were all tasked with bringing a dish to share, a potluck of mismatched culinary ambitions and varying levels of cooking skills. Liam immediately and predictably volunteered to bring the wine, proclaiming himself a connoisseur of fermented grapes with a self-deprecating wink. Because, he's so helpful. And so good at avoiding actual work. As we descended into the familiar chaos of planning, debating the merits of homemade cranberry sauce versus the canned jelly kind, arguing over whether green bean casserole was a crime against humanity, I am firmly in the pro camp, I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with Liam. He had been acting a bit differently lately, more withdrawn than usual, a shadow lurking behind his usual bright smile. He'd been canceling plans at the last minute, responding to texts with vague, non-committal answers. More guarded. It was subtle, but noticeable, like a minor chord in a cheerful melody. I just couldn't quite put my finger on what it was, and it was driving me crazy. Something was simmering beneath the surface, and I was determined to find out what. Part 2. The project expanded. The next day, around midday, a notification popped up on my phone. A direct message from Liam. Usually, I'd feel a little thrill, a tiny burst of dopamine. But today, the message felt different. Ominous, almost. He was usually so flippant, so quick with a sarcastic jab or a goofy meme. This was unusually direct. "Hey Sarah, got a sec? Needed your advice on something." I chewed on my lip, a knot forming in my stomach. What could he possibly need my advice on? Fixing his car? Negotiating a better price on vinyl records? Definitely not something involving feelings. Sure, I replied, trying to sound casual. What's up? There was a pause, longer than necessary, while the little typing bubble danced on my screen, adding to my growing unease. Then the message finally appeared. Okay, so remember that girl I was talking about last night? The artistically challenged one. My eyes narrowed. Here we go. This was either going to be incredibly awkward or incredibly infuriating. Possibly both. I mentally braced myself for a barrage of excuses and justifications. Yeah, I replied cautiously, keeping my tone neutral. I remember. Well, he continued, and the pause felt even more drawn out this time. She's actually really important to me. And I messed up. Badly. She overheard the wine and wine thing, and understandably, she's furious. Like, full-on radio silence. Deleted me from all social media platforms furious. I want to fix things, but I have absolutely no idea how. You're good at this kind of stuff. You always know what to say. You're like the queen of apologies and making amends. Can you help me? My blood simmered. He wanted my help to win back a girl he'd just publicly, albeit indirectly, insulted. The hypocrisy was almost too much to bear. The gall. My first impulse was to type back a scathing response, a perfectly crafted takedown of his cluelessness and entitlement. But then I looked closer at the message. Despite the awkward phrasing, there was a genuine note of concern, a hint of vulnerability in his request. He truly seemed to care, or at least to be genuinely upset that he'd messed things up. And if I was honest with myself, a small part of me, the foolish, hopeful part, was curious. I sighed inwardly. He was playing me, or trying to, and I was letting him. Fine. I typed, adding a mental eye roll. But you owe me big time. And this better not involve any serenades or public displays of affection. I'm not about to be an accomplice in some cringeworthy rom-com moment. What exactly do you want me to do? His reply was almost instant. Seriously? You'll help? Amazing. Okay, so I basically need you to, well, figure out what she likes. What makes her tick? What kind of grand gesture, if any, would actually work? I'm clueless. I'm usually good at this stuff, but I've totally blown it. I snorted. You're usually good at this stuff? Liam, you usually rely on your charm and a well-timed joke. That doesn't exactly scream deep understanding to me. Okay, fair point, he conceded. But I really like her, Sarah. I actually do. And I don't want to lose her because I said something stupid on a drunken video call. He didn't say he loved her. Didn't even say he was in love with her. Just that he liked her. A lot, apparently. But enough to swallow his pride and ask for my help? Enough to expose his own vulnerability? It was enough to pique my interest, at least. Alright, I typed, resigning myself to this ridiculous mission. Consider me your relationship consultant. But you have to be completely honest with me. No hiding anything. No holding back. I need all the details. And I reserve the right to veto any ideas I deem too cheesy or cliché. Got it. Got it, he replied, adding a thumbs-up emoji. You're the best, Sarah. Seriously. The best, huh? That's what friends were for, I suppose. To clean up each other's messes. Even when those messes involved navigating the treacherous waters of modern romance and rescuing emotionally inept guys from their own foot-and-mouth disease. I closed my laptop, a mixture of dread and a strange, unsettling excitement churning inside me. This was going to be a long and possibly very painful project. Part 3. The investigation expanded. My mission was simple, in theory. Figure out what made this Maya tick, what her passions were, what gestures of affection would resonate with her, and what would come off as insincere or manipulative. In practice, it felt like navigating a minefield, armed with nothing but a smartphone and a rapidly dwindling supply of patience. So I did what any self-respecting modern woman with a slightly unhealthy dose of curiosity and a whole lot of free time would do. I went full-on social media stalker. I started with the obvious, Instagram. I searched for Maya and his followers. There were dozens, maybe hundreds. Okay, I had to be more targeted. I asked Liam if he knew her full name. He hesitated, then sent it. Maya Carter. Carter felt like a common last name too, damn it. After half an hour more of scrolling and staring, I found her. Or at least, I thought I found her. The profile picture was a close-up of a pair of bright green eyes, peering out from behind a curtain of dark hair. The account was private. Damn it. I requested to follow her, but there was no guarantee she'd accept. Frustrated, I started clicking through mutual friends. I cross-referenced the cities they lived in with Liam's social media. Bingo. This Maya's Instagram was curated, but not overly so. The photos were artfully composed, bathed in natural light, but they also felt real. She loved art, especially photography, judging by the numerous pictures she'd taken of local galleries and street art. She had a flair for vintage clothing, pairing thrift store finds with modern pieces in a way that felt effortlessly chic. And she adored rescued dogs, her feed peppered with adorable pictures of a scruffy terrier mix named Pickles. She seemed genuine, the kind of girl who valued authenticity and substance over surface-level charm, which made Liam's artistically challenged comment seem even more cringeworthy, and the more I thought about it, the more I wanted to push his head under the lake. I took notes on her profile, analyzing her style, her interests, her apparent values. I dug deeper, searching for her on other platforms. Her Twitter was mostly retweets about animal rights and political activism. She was passionate about social justice, vocal about her beliefs, and unafraid to use her voice. She had a strong moral compass, a clear sense of who she was. This wasn't going to be easy. This wasn't some vapid influencer who'd be swayed by a bouquet of roses and a box of chocolates. This was someone who valued substance, integrity, and genuine connection. Meanwhile, I started extracting details from Liam about their relationship. What did they do together? What did they talk about? What were their inside jokes? What were the good times like? He was frustratingly vague, focusing mostly on how chill she was and how they both liked going to the same trendy coffee shop on Main Street. He kept using words like laid-back and low-key, which told me absolutely nothing. He was more focused on the superficialities rather than the deeper layers of their connection. It became increasingly clear that he knew her on a superficial level. His attraction was based on an initial spark of physical attraction, perhaps a shared sense of humor, rather than a deep understanding of her values, her dreams, or her fears. The more I learned about Maya, the more I realized that a grand, public apology wouldn't work. It would reek of desperation and come across as performative, insincere. She needed something personal, something that showed Liam actually cared, that he actually understood her, and that he was genuinely remorseful for his thoughtless comment. I started forming a plan, piecing together the fragments of information I had gleaned from her online presence and Liam's limited insights. But I needed more information. I needed to find a way to get inside her head, to understand her perspective. I needed to know what would truly move her. Part 4. The revelation expanded. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day of dead-end leads and vague answers from Liam, I insisted we meet at our usual coffee shop, The Daily Grind. Ironically named, considering how little grinding actually happened there, mostly just gossiping and caffeine-fueled procrastination. I needed to lay out the plan to see if I could actually salvage this ridiculous situation. The aroma of roasted coffee beans and the low hum of conversation filled the air, a familiar and comforting backdrop to the impending awkwardness. I arrived first, snagging our usual corner booth near the window. Liam was late, as usual. I used the time to review my notes, rereading Maya's social media posts, trying to get a better sense of her personality. When Liam finally showed up, he looked harried, his hair even more disheveled than usual, and a nervous energy radiating off him. "Sorry I'm late," he said, sliding into the booth. "Work thing. Total nightmare." He didn't meet my eyes. "It's fine," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Let's just focus on this. I think I've got something." I pulled out my notebook, spreading my notes across the table. "Okay," I said, laying out my plan. Maya is clearly not someone who's impressed by grand gestures or superficial displays. Forget the flowers, forget the expensive gifts. You need to show her you actually get her. That you understand her values, her passions, her sense of humor. I think I know how. I outlined my idea, a detailed plan involving a handwritten letter expressing genuine remorse, a small donation to her favorite animal rescue organization, and a carefully curated playlist of her favorite music. I emphasized the importance of sincerity, authenticity, and humility. As I spoke, Liam's face grew increasingly pale. At first, I thought it was relief, a sign that he actually appreciated my efforts. But then, I noticed a flicker of something else in his eyes, a flash of fear, perhaps even guilt. "Wait," he said, interrupting me, his voice suddenly tight. "How did you know all that stuff about her? The vintage clothing, the rescue dogs, the specific type of fair trade organic coffee she likes? She's only posted about that once years ago." I blinked, confused by his reaction. "From her social media, duh. I told you I did my research. I'm a great detective. And from what you told me." I was so tired of this project and these excuses. He shook his head slowly, his brow furrowed. "I never told you about her favorite coffee, or about pickles, or the rescue organization she donates to." A cold dread began to creep up my spine, a chilling premonition that something was terribly wrong. I pulled out my phone, a knot forming in my stomach. I opened Maya's Instagram profile, the one I had been stalking so thoroughly for the past few days. It was private, always had been. So was her Twitter. I definitely requested to follow her a few days ago, but she never accepted. How did I know those things? How had I pieced together such a detailed profile of someone whose social media was locked down tighter than Fort Knox? When did Liam even tell me her name? Had he even said it? I searched my memory, desperately trying to recall the moment when he had revealed that crucial piece of information. But it was a blank. The name Maya seemed to have materialized in my head, fully formed. I looked at Liam, a terrifying realization dawning on my face. He was watching me, his expression a mixture of anxiety and something else, something I couldn't quite decipher. "What the hell is going on, Liam?" I said, my voice trembling slightly, despite my best efforts to control it. "Why didn't I follow her Instagram after requesting?" He hesitated, avoiding my eyes. He shifted in his seat, fiddling with the sugar packets on the table. Finally, he confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Okay, so, Maya isn't real." Part 5, the twist expanded. "What do you mean, not real?" I demanded, my voice rising despite my attempts to keep it down. The low hum of the coffee shop faded into background noise as my focus narrowed entirely on Liam, on the web of lies he had spun, on the sheer audacity of his deception. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, a sickening mix of anger, betrayal, and utter disbelief. Liam visibly winced, shrinking back into the booth. "I made her up. It was a project. For my creative writing class. I had to create a fictional character and then develop a believable online presence for her. The wine and wine comment was just a setup, a dramatic hook. I wanted to see if I could make her seem real to all of you, to test my world building." I stared at him, utterly speechless. He had manipulated all of us, but especially me. He had exploited my feelings, my insecurities, my willingness to help. The thought of how freely I had poured my energy into this fake project, how much time I'd wasted on stalking a figment of his imagination, made my stomach churn. I forced a shaky laugh, a sound that felt hollow and strained. "And you used me to win her back? You asked me for relationship advice, for guidance on how to make amends, for emotional support, all for a fake girlfriend." He squirmed, his face flushed with a mixture of guilt and embarrassment. "I knew you were good at this stuff, that you have the best writing advice. I thought you'd be a great resource on this project. And, well, I didn't really know you felt like this. About me." The truth hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. All this time, I had secretly harbored a crush on him, a hope that maybe, just maybe, he saw me as more than just a friend. I thought he was just a bit dense, oblivious to the subtle cues I'd been sending his way for years. But now it was clear he knew. He had to have known. Had this been some elaborate social experiment to see how far I would go for him? To gauge the depth of my feelings? Just to satisfy his own ego? To play with my emotions for the sake of some stupid writing assignment? The realization stung like a slap in the face. I looked at him, a strange and complicated mess of emotions swirling inside me. There was anger, yes, and hurt, and a profound sense of betrayal. But beneath all that, there was also a deep, lingering disappointment. I had built him up in my mind, imagining him to be someone thoughtful, kind, and genuine. But he had revealed himself to be selfish, manipulative, and utterly lacking in empathy. "You are unbelievable, Liam," I said, my voice shaking with barely suppressed rage. "I can't believe I wasted my time helping you on this stupid project. I am so done with this. And with you." I stood up abruptly, knocking over my half-empty coffee cup in the process. The hot liquid spilled across the table, a fitting symbol of the mess he had created. I grabbed my bag, ignoring his protests as he tried to apologize, to explain, to minimize his actions. I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving him sitting there, stunned and bewildered. As I walked, the cool evening air hit my face, clearing my head slightly. I replayed the events of the past few days in my mind, re-examining every interaction, every conversation. I thought about Maya, the perfect, idealized girl he had created, the girl who embodied all the qualities he supposedly admired. And then, a realization dawned on me, a spark of defiance igniting within my chest. I knew Maya even better than he did. After all, I had helped him write her. I had fleshed out her personality, shaped her interests, given her a voice. I had poured my own creativity, my own imagination, into bringing her to life. And if I wanted, I could write a very different ending to their story. I smiled, a slow, mischievous smile that spread across my face. He thought he was in control, that he was the author of this narrative. But he was wrong. I had the power to rewrite the script, to take control of the narrative, to turn his own creation against him. Maybe I would have Maya start writing her own creative writing project, a project about the guy she was seeing who was a complete and total emotional moron. Maybe that was exactly what I would do. Maybe I'd even make it a bestseller. My head started to spin with ideas, a surge of creative energy coursing through my veins. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. And this time, I was the one holding the pen. I pulled out my phone and started writing. My friends, please subscribe to my channel, like the video, and write a comment, and we begin. Part 1. The Family Photograph Expanded. The afternoon sun, filtered through the sheer curtains of my living room window, illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air around the framed photograph on my mantelpiece. It was a picture that, for years, had been a source of comfort, a tangible representation of a simpler, happier time. Now, it felt like a cruel taunt, a mocking reminder of everything I had lost. I picked up the frame, the cool glass a stark contrast to the heat simmering within me. The image was clear, vibrant, almost painfully alive. It was a snapshot from my 25th birthday party, a sun-drenched celebration held in the familiar, sprawling backyard of our parents' house in suburban Connecticut. The scene was idyllic, balloons bobbing in the gentle breeze, fairy lights twinkling in the trees, laughter echoing across the manicured lawn. There I was, younger, brighter, my face flushed with joy, my eyes sparkling with carefree optimism. My arm was looped through Liam's, my boyfriend of 4 years, my best friend, the man I thought I would spend the rest of my life with. He was gazing at me with that goofy head-over-heels look that I had always adored, the look that made my stomach flip and my heart swell with a sense of belonging. His smile was genuine, his eyes crinkling at the corners. In that moment, in that picture, everything felt perfect. But standing beside us, a little too close for comfort, was my sister, Chloe. She was stunning as always. Tall, blonde, with a smile that could charm the birds from the trees. But in this particular photograph, her smile was just a touch too bright, her posture a little too stiff, her eyes too focused on Liam. They weren't flirtatious exactly, but there was a possessiveness in her gaze, a silent claim that made my skin crawl, even now years later. At the time, I dismissed it. Chloe had always been a bit of a flirt, a social butterfly drawn to attention and admiration. She thrived on being the center of attention, the life of the party. Liam, undeniably charming, with his easy smile and quick wit, was the kind of guy every girl crushed on, even my own sister. I chalked it up to harmless sibling rivalry, a minor irritation in an otherwise perfect day. We had been planning our future, Liam and I, for months. We had spent hours poring over wedding magazines, debating color schemes and floral arrangements. We had visited quaint New England towns, searching for the perfect location for our cozy little house, a place where we could raise our future children and grow old together. We had even started researching golden retriever breeders, convinced that a furry companion would complete our idyllic suburban tableau. We were solid a team. We had weathered storms together, supported each other through career setbacks and family dramas. We were the envy of our friends, the couple everyone aspired to be. Or so I thought. 6 months later, my world imploded. The carefully constructed facade of our perfect relationship shattered into a million irreparable pieces. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, an unremarkable day that would forever be etched in my memory. Liam called me at work, his voice tight and strained, lacking its usual warmth and playfulness. He said he needed to talk, that it was important. My heart fluttered with anticipation. I had been secretly hoping he would propose on my birthday, but he had played it cool, insisting that he wanted to wait for the right moment. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the moment I had been waiting for. I met him at our usual coffee shop, a cozy little place with mismatched furniture and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee. I arrived early, jittery with excitement, picturing the proposal, the ring, the tears of joy. Instead, he dropped a bomb, a devastating confession that ripped the rug out from under my feet. He was leaving me. He was breaking up with me. Not for another woman, not because he had fallen out of love. He was leaving me for Chloe. The world went blurry, the sounds of the cafe fading into a distant hum. I remember snippets of the conversation, his stammered apologies, his pathetic justifications, his hollow promises to remain friends. Chloe's name, repeated like a curse, each syllable a stab wound to my heart. He claimed they hadn't planned it, that it had just happened, a sudden, undeniable connection that neither of them could resist. I walked out of that coffee shop numb, a hollow shell of my former self. The picture of our perfect future dissolved into a million shattered pieces, scattered like dust in the wind. The ring I had secretly dreamed of never materialized. The house in the suburbs remained a distant fantasy. The golden retriever puppy would never be ours. The worst part, the part that twisted the knife even deeper, was my parents' reaction. Instead of offering me comfort and support, they sided with Chloe. "Chloe and Liam are in love, darling," my mother had said, her voice annoyingly reasonable, as if I was overreacting to a minor inconvenience. "You need to be the bigger person. Forgive them. It's what's best for the family. Forgive them." They had stolen my life, my happiness, my future. They had betrayed me in the most profound and unforgivable way imaginable. And yet, my parents expected me to simply brush it off, to pretend that everything was okay, to sacrifice my own happiness for the sake of maintaining a false sense of family harmony. I stared at the photograph, my anger simmering just below the surface. The smiling faces, the idyllic scene, the promise of a perfect future. It was all a lie. And in that moment, I vowed to never forgive them, to never forget the pain they had inflicted upon me. The framed photograph, once a symbol of love and happiness, had become a symbol of betrayal and deceit. It was a reminder of the woman who had stolen my life and the man who had let her. And I would never let them forget it either. Part 2. The wedding invitation expanded. The 2 years following Liam's confession and my parents' infuriatingly placid response had been a period of intense self-reflection, forced reinvention, and a slow, arduous climb back to normalcy. I had packed my bags, said a terse goodbye to my parents, avoiding Chloe and Liam at all costs, and moved halfway across the country to Seattle. I needed space, distance, a clean break from the toxic environment that had suffocated me. I threw myself into my career, working long hours, immersing myself in the complex world of coding and algorithms. The logical, structured nature of software engineering offered a welcome respite from the messy, unpredictable emotions that had plagued me for so long. I found solace in the challenge, in the feeling of accomplishment that came with solving complex problems and building elegant solutions. I even started dating again, cautiously dipping my toes back into the dating pool after years of committed monogamy. I met some nice guys, intelligent and kind, but no one quite measured up to the image of Liam that still lingered in my heart, the ghost of a love that could have been. I found myself constantly comparing them, searching for the same spark, the same connection, the same easy familiarity that I had shared with Liam. But it was no use. He had set the bar too high, and no one seemed to be able to clear it. Then, one crisp autumn morning, the past came crashing back into my present with brutal force. The mail arrived, a stack of bills and junk mail, indistinguishable from any other day. But nestled among the mundane correspondence was something that made my heart stop, a thick, creamy envelope, addressed to me in elegant, flowing calligraphy. I knew what it was before I even opened it. My hands trembled as I carefully tore open the seal, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside, on heavy embossed paper, was the wedding invitation. Chloe and Liam request the honor of your presence at their marriage. The words shimmered in the sunlight, mocking me with their formality, their audacity. Rage, cold and sharp, coursed through me, a familiar sensation that I had thought I had successfully suppressed. How dare they? How dare they flaunt their happiness in my face, as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't shattered my life into a million pieces. How dare they expect me to celebrate their union, a union built on betrayal and deceit. I wanted to tear the invitation into shreds, to burn it to ashes, to scream at the top of my lungs. I wanted to pack my bags and disappear again, to run as far away from them as possible. But then, a strange calm settled over me, a sense of detached curiosity that surprised even me. An invitation was an invitation. A formal request, a carefully crafted message. And in this case, it was also an opportunity. An opportunity to observe, to analyze, to dissect the carefully constructed facade of their happiness. A chance to see them together, to witness their dynamic, to understand what had possessed Liam, what had driven him to betray me so completely. And most importantly, a chance to know if they were truly happy, or if their perfect facade was just a carefully constructed lie, a desperate attempt to convince themselves and the world that they had made the right choice. My parents were, of course, thrilled that I was even considering attending the wedding. It would mean so much to Chloe, my mother gushed during one of our painfully infrequent phone calls. It would show her that you've truly forgiven them, that you've moved on. It would bring the family back together. The pressure was immense, a constant barrage of guilt trips and thinly veiled manipulations. They couldn't understand that attending the wedding wasn't about forgiveness. It was about understanding. It was about closure. It was about seeing for myself what had become of the man I had once loved and the sister I had once trusted. Reluctantly, I RSVP'd yes. I didn't do it for Chloe. I didn't do it for my parents. I did it for myself. I needed to see them, to observe them, to analyze them. A dark curiosity had taken root within me, a burning desire to understand the forces that had conspired to destroy my happiness. I wasn't going to the wedding to celebrate their love. I was going to the wedding to satisfy my own need for answers, to see for myself if their happiness was real or a carefully constructed illusion. I was going to the wedding to put the ghost of Liam to rest, once and for all. And if along the way I happened to disrupt their carefully orchestrated celebration, well, that would just be an added bonus. Part 3. The reception deception expanded. The wedding was a lavish affair, an ostentatious display of wealth and social standing that reeked of my parents' desire to impress their friends and, undoubtedly, Chloe's insatiable need for attention. The ceremony itself was a blur of forced smiles, saccharine vows, and expertly staged photo opportunities. I sat in the back row, a silent observer, my heart a cold, unyielding stone in my chest. The reception was held at a sprawling country club, its manicured grounds stretching as far as the eye could see. A cascading floral arrangement, a riot of white roses and lilies, dominated the entrance, its fragrant aroma almost cloying. Inside, a string quartet played classical melodies, their music a soothing counterpoint to the undercurrent of tension that permeated the air. Everything was perfect, meticulously planned, and flawlessly executed. But beneath the surface, I sensed a subtle unease, a feeling that something was amiss. Chloe, radiant in a designer gown that probably cost more than my annual salary, floated through the crowd like a fairy tale princess, her face beaming with carefully constructed joy. Liam, handsome in his impeccably tailored tuxedo, looked uncomfortable. His smile seemed forced, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. I forced a smile as I congratulated them, my voice tight and strained. "Congratulations, Chloe," I said, offering her a perfunctory hug. "You look beautiful." Chloe hugged me tightly, her grip almost unnervingly strong, her voice saccharine sweet. "Thank you for being here, Ava," she whispered in my ear. "It means the world to me." Liam just nodded, avoiding my gaze, his face pale and drawn. He mumbled a half-hearted, "Thanks for coming," before quickly turning away, as if afraid to meet my eyes. The reception was a carefully orchestrated performance, a charade designed to convince everyone that Chloe and Liam were blissfully happy, that their love was strong and unwavering. My parents, of course, were playing their roles to perfection, beaming with pride, basking in the reflected glory of their daughter's perfect wedding. The guests, a collection of wealthy socialites and family friends, gushed about their love, their beauty, their perfect union. But I saw the cracks in the facade. I saw the way Liam's eyes darted around the room, searching for something he couldn't find. I saw the way Chloe clung to him possessively, her grip tightening whenever another woman approached him, as if afraid he might slip away. I saw the forced laughter, the too bright smiles, the subtle signs of strain and tension that betrayed the lie they were trying so hard to maintain. Then, across the crowded room, I saw him. A man standing near the bar, observing the scene with a sardonic smile that mirrored my own. He was tall, with dark hair that fell artfully across his forehead and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through me, to recognize the pain and the resentment that I had tried so hard to conceal. He was an outsider, an observer, just like me. He caught my gaze and raised his glass in a silent toast, a knowing acknowledgement of the charade that was unfolding before us. Intrigue sparked within me, a flicker of curiosity that cut through the numbness that had enveloped me for so long. Who was this man? And why did he seem so unknowing? Why did he seem to understand the hidden truths beneath the surface of this perfect wedding? I found myself drawn to him, compelled to learn more about him, to understand his perspective on this surreal and unsettling event. I knew I shouldn't, that it was dangerous to engage with a stranger in this environment, but the pull was too strong to resist. He was a beacon of honesty in a sea of deception, a kindred spirit in a room full of strangers. Part 4. The mysterious stranger expanded. Later in the evening, as the reception dragged on and the air grew thick with champagne and forced merriment, I found a plausible excuse to slip away from my family's watchful eyes and make my way towards the man by the bar. The string quartet had been replaced by a DJ, who was spinning a mix of upbeat pop songs that did little to alleviate the underlying tension in the room. He was even more intriguing up close. His eyes held a depth of intelligence and a hint of world-weariness that belied his relatively young age. He was impeccably dressed in a dark suit, but there was a looseness to his posture, a subtle air of defiance that suggested he didn't quite belong in this rarefied atmosphere. I approached him hesitantly, unsure of what to say. "Excuse me," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. "I noticed you earlier." He turned to face me, his lips curving into a wry smile. "And I noticed you," he said, his voice a low, smooth baritone that sent a shiver down my spine. "Let me guess. You're Ava." My breath caught in my throat. "How do you know?" He shrugged, taking a sip of his drink. "Let's just say I have a knack for reading people. And Liam, well, he wears his regrets on his sleeve. He's been looking at you all night with the longing of a lost puppy." He introduced himself as Ethan, a friend of the family, although I'd never seen him before, and my parents certainly hadn't mentioned him. He was deliberately vague about his connection to Chloe and Liam, but I sensed that he knew them far better than he let on. We struck up a conversation easily, drawn together by our shared outsider status and our mutual disdain for the wedding spectacle. Ethan was witty, intelligent, and refreshingly cynical about the entire affair. He dissected the carefully constructed performances of the guests with surgical precision, exposing their insecurities and their hidden agendas with a sharp and insightful humor. As the evening wore on, Ethan began to tell me things about Liam and Chloe's relationship that chilled me to the bone. He painted a picture of a marriage built on a foundation of lies and insecurity, a relationship riddled with resentment and regret. "Chloe," he said, was intensely jealous and controlling, constantly demanding Liam's attention and reassurance. She was driven by a deep-seated fear of abandonment, and she clung to Liam with a desperate possessiveness that bordered on obsession. Liam, on the other hand, was plagued by guilt and resentment, trapped in a relationship he no longer wanted. He was suffocating under Chloe's constant demands, yearning for the freedom and the genuine connection he had once shared with me. He was a prisoner of his own making, bound by the guilt of his betrayal and the fear of disappointing Chloe. "He's not happy, Ava," Ethan said, his voice low and serious. "And she knows it. That's why she's so controlling, so desperate to keep him close. She knows that if she lets go, even for a moment, he'll slip away." Suddenly, everything clicked into place. I understood why Chloe had stolen Liam, why she had been so insistent on marrying him. It wasn't out of love, it was out of spite, out of a desperate need to possess something that I had, to prove that she was better than me. And Liam, weak and easily manipulated, had allowed himself to be swept along, a pawn in Chloe's twisted game. But why was Ethan telling me all of this? What was his agenda? Why was he so willing to reveal the secrets of Chloe and Liam's marriage to a virtual stranger? What did he hope to gain? I was about to press him for answers, to demand an explanation for his sudden. When Chloe approached us, her eyes narrowed with suspicion, her smile tight and unnatural. "Liam's looking for you, Ethan," she said, her voice sharp and laced with a barely concealed warning. "He wants to talk to you about business." Ethan excused himself, offering me a knowing glance before melting back into the crowd, leaving me alone with Chloe and a burning desire for answers. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but I knew I was still missing something crucial, something that would explain Ethan's motivations and reveal the true depth of the deception that had consumed my life. Part 5. The Ultimate Revelation. Expanded and concluded. As Ethan melted back into the throng of wedding guests, a palpable tension descended, isolating Chloe and me in a bubble of animosity. The forced cheerfulness of the reception faded away, replaced by a raw, visceral confrontation that laid bare the years of simmering resentment between us. Chloe turned to me, her eyes blazing with a fury she could no longer contain. Her smile was gone, replaced by a mask of barely concealed venom. The designer gown, the perfect hair, the flawless makeup, all seemed like a pathetic attempt to disguise the ugly truth that lay beneath. "Stay away from my husband, Ava," she hissed, her voice low and menacing. "He's mine now. You've had your chance. Don't try to take him back." "Is he really?" I asked, my voice surprisingly calm, considering the turmoil raging inside me. "Or is he just a trophy, a symbol of your victory? A way to prove that you're better than me?" Chloe's face contorted with rage, her carefully constructed composure crumbling before my eyes. "Get out of my life, Ava. You've already ruined everything. You always do." "Ruined everything?" I echoed, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. "You're the one who ruined everything, Chloe. You stole my boyfriend, you married him, and you've been living a lie ever since. You're the one who built this house of cards, and now it's all coming crashing down." She took a step towards me, her hands clenched into fists, her eyes narrowed into slits. "You don't know anything," she spat. "You have no idea what it's like to be me." Then, just as I was bracing myself for a physical confrontation, Ethan reappeared, his face grim, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and apprehension. He stepped between us, placing a protective hand on Chloe's arm. "Chloe, Liam needs to see you," he said, his voice low and urgent. "It's urgent. He wants to talk to you, alone." Chloe hesitated, her eyes darting between Ethan and me, her face a mask of confusion and suspicion. She seemed torn between her desire to lash out at me and her fear of what Liam might reveal. Finally, she glared at me one last time, her eyes filled with a hatred I had never seen before, and stalked away, following Ethan towards the quieter corners of the country club. As they disappeared into the crowd, Ethan turned back to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and anticipation. He hesitated for a moment, as if unsure whether to speak. "Liam just confessed something to Chloe," he said, his voice low and somber. "Something that will change everything. Something that she never expected." He paused, letting the suspense hang in the air, his eyes searching my face, gauging my reaction. He confessed that he is not the one who can have children. It was Chloe. All this time, she knew she couldn't conceive, but she couldn't let Liam go. I stared at Ethan, confused, the pieces of the puzzle not quite fitting together. Why was Liam confessing this now? And why would he want Chloe to tell me? Before I could formulate a question, Ethan added, "He asked to let me tell you that he only broke up with you because Chloe threatened to tell your parents about an affair you had been keeping secret from them." My breath caught in my throat. No, this could not be real. I had been completely faithful to Liam during our whole relationship, and I was sure he had been faithful to me as well. Before I could say anything, Ethan said, "Yes, it's a lie. Everything Chloe has told Liam about you has been a lie, and he wants you to hear the truth and decide if you want to be with him or not." The affair was between Chloe and Ethan. In that moment, the final pieces of the puzzle snapped into place, revealing the full extent of Chloe's deception and the true nature of Ethan's involvement. He wasn't just a friend of the family, he was Chloe's lover, the man she had turned to for comfort and validation during her loveless marriage. And Liam, trapped in a web of lies and guilt, had finally cracked, confessing his sins and revealing Chloe's treachery. My life had been stolen, manipulated, and distorted by a woman I had loved and trusted. But in that moment, as I stood there amidst the wreckage of her carefully constructed lies, I realized I had a choice. I could succumb to bitterness and resentment, allowing her to continue to control my life, or I could embrace the truth and move on, finally free from her poisonous influence. I took a deep breath, a sense of liberation washing over me, cleansing me of the anger and resentment that had consumed me for so long. Liam was no longer the man I remembered, and Chloe was a stranger I didn't recognize. They were both trapped in a cycle of lies and self-deception, and I no longer wanted to be a part of their twisted game. "Thank you, Ethan," I said, my voice steady and resolute, "for telling me the truth. But I think I'll pass. I deserve better than both of them. I deserve a life free of lies, manipulation, and deceit." I turned and walked away from the wedding, away from the lies and the betrayal, towards a future filled with the promise of honesty, self-respect, and genuine love. The framed photograph on my mantelpiece would remain a reminder of the past, of the woman who had tried to steal my life, but it would no longer define my present. My future, I knew, was mine to create, and I was finally ready to embrace it on my own terms. As I walked away, I could hear Ethan calling my name, but knowing that my journey had just begun, I kept walking. I would find my happiness elsewhere. Part 1. "You're being too sensitive, babe." The words, delivered with a sigh and a roll of his perfectly sculpted eyes, hit me like a splash of ice water on a sunny California day. It was Liam's go-to dismissal, his verbal get-out-of-jail-free card, whenever I dared to express a feeling that didn't align with his meticulously curated reality. And every time he said it, little piece of me chipped away. We'd been dating for 11 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days. Yes, I was counting. I'm a writer. Details matter. And in the superficial, fast-paced world of Los Angeles, almost a year felt like a lifetime. Especially since I, hopelessly romantic sap that I am, had actually started entertaining the possibility that Liam, with his effortlessly cool vibe and his talent for finding the perfect Instagram filter, might just be the one. We met, as all good LA love stories do, at a trendy coffee shop in Silver Lake. I was wrestling with a particularly stubborn plot point in my screenplay, and he was sketching abstract art on a napkin, fueled by a double espresso and an aura of undeniable charisma. We bonded over our mutual disdain for pumpkin spice lattes, our shared love of obscure Swedish indie bands, and our unwavering commitment to the perfect avocado toast. He was charming, witty, and devastatingly handsome, with a jawline that could cut glass and eyes that sparkled like the lights of the city at night. Within weeks, we were inseparable, spending our days exploring hidden vintage shops, hiking in Runyon Canyon, and attending pop-up art exhibitions. We spent our nights curled up on his vintage velvet couch, binge-watching obscure documentaries and debating the merits of various artisanal cheeses. I'd even started letting my guard down, sharing my deepest insecurities and my most embarrassing childhood memories. I was falling, and I was falling hard. But there was this one thing. This one tiny, persistent, nagging little detail that buzzed around my head like an irritating gnat. His Instagram bio. It was a seemingly innocuous string of words, but it gnawed at me, kept me up at night, and cast a shadow of doubt over our seemingly perfect relationship. There it was, in bold, unwavering letters, right beneath his perfectly posed profile picture, Bachelor Actor Dog Dad. I know. It sounds utterly ridiculous, even as I type it. Petty. Insecure. The kind of thing you'd read in a Cosmo article about red flags you're ignoring in your relationship. But for some reason, it just got under my skin. Every time I saw it, I felt a jolt of discomfort, a subtle reminder that I wasn't quite permanent in his life, that I was just a temporary fixture in his carefully curated online persona. That despite all the time we spent together, the intimacies we shared, and the I love yous whispered in the dark, he was still, at least in the digital world, presenting himself as available. Part 2. I tried to convince myself that I was being irrational, that I was letting my insecurities get the better of me. After all, social media is a carefully constructed illusion, a highlight reel of filtered selfies and boastful pronouncements. It's not real life, right? People only post the best versions of themselves, the moments they want the world to see. Liam's Instagram was no different. A glossy, aspirational depiction of his life as a struggling actor, a devoted dog dad, and, apparently, a perpetually available bachelor. I told myself that I shouldn't read too much into it. That he was probably just too busy with auditions and acting classes to bother updating his bio. That it was a harmless oversight, a trivial detail that didn't reflect his true feelings for me. I even considered changing my bio to something equally provocative, like Runaway Bride Seeks Adventure Foodie, just to see if he noticed. But then I remembered that I was an adult, not a teenager playing silly mind games. Still, the bachelor thing bothered me. It was like a tiny pebble in my shoe, constantly rubbing and irritating me, no matter how hard I tried to ignore it. Was he keeping his options open? Was he secretly hoping for a better offer? Was he waiting for a hotter, more successful actress to sweep him off his feet and whisk him away to a life of red carpet premieres and paparazzi flashes? The thought made my stomach churn. I knew it was ridiculous, that Liam wasn't some shallow, fame-obsessed player. But still, the doubt lingered, whispering insidious suggestions in my ear. So, one night, after a particularly cozy evening of Netflix and takeout Thai food, I decided to address the elephant in the room, or rather, the elephant in his Instagram bio. We were sprawled on the couch, bathed in the warm glow of the TV screen, his arm wrapped possessively around my shoulders. It felt like the perfect moment to broach the subject, to finally put my anxieties to rest. "Hey, Liam," I said, trying to sound breezy and nonchalant, like I was just making casual conversation. "I was just wondering. I noticed your Instagram bio still says, Bachelor. Is that intentional?" He chuckled, that easy, charming chuckle that I usually found so endearing, but tonight, it grated on my nerves. "Oh, that," he said, his voice casual. "I just haven't gotten around to changing it. You know how it is. Life gets crazy." He reached for the remote, changing the channel to a baseball game. It was a clear deflection, a subtle attempt to change the subject, but I wasn't going to let him off the hook that easily. "But it's been like almost a year," I pointed out, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. "We've been dating for almost a year. Don't you think it's time to update your online persona?" He sighed, that dramatic sigh that indicated he was about to launch into a lecture on the importance of not taking social media too seriously. "You're being too sensitive, babe," he said, his eyes never leaving the TV screen. "It's just a bio. It doesn't mean anything." His words, delivered with such casual dismissiveness, stung more than I expected. The validation I had been so desperate for, completely absent. Part 3. "It doesn't mean anything?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly, the carefully constructed facade of nonchalance crumbling around me. "But it makes it seem like you're still available, like you're still looking. Don't you think it's a little misleading? Especially since we're, dating?" He finally turned away from the baseball game, his expression shifting from amusement to annoyance. "Look, Allie," he said, his voice laced with exasperation, "I love you, okay? You know that. I spend all my time with you. I've introduced you to my friends, my family. What more do you want? I want you to acknowledge that I exist in your online life, I retorted, my voice trembling slightly. I want you to show the world that you're not just a bachelor anymore. That you're with someone. That you're with me. He sighed again, running a hand through his perfectly tousled hair. Ali, seriously, you can't let little things like this get to you. It's just social media. It's not real life. Our real life is amazing. Why are you letting some stupid Instagram bio ruin it? But it is real life, I countered, my voice growing louder. Social media is part of real life now. It's how people connect. It's how people present themselves to the world. It's not just some separate, insignificant thing. We argued for a while longer, going in circles, each of us digging in our heels, refusing to budge. He insisted that I was being overly sensitive, that I was making a mountain out of a molehill. I insisted that he was being dismissive, that he wasn't taking my feelings seriously. He told me I was being insecure. I told him he was being inconsiderate. He said I was overreacting. I said he was being deliberately obtuse. Finally, exhausted and defeated, I gave up. I could see that I wasn't getting through to him, that he simply didn't understand why it bothered me so much. And honestly, I wasn't even sure why it bothered me so much. Was I being insecure? Was I being unreasonable? Was I letting my own anxieties and insecurities cloud my judgment? Fine, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. You're right. It's just a bio. It doesn't matter. I turned away from him, pretending to be engrossed in the baseball game. But inside, I was seething. I felt dismissed, invalidated, and worst of all, foolish. I had opened myself up, revealed my vulnerability, and he had responded with a shrug and a sigh. I decided to let it go, to bury my feelings and try to move on. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it started to sprout, growing stronger with each passing day. The warmth and affection that had characterized our relationship began to cool, replaced by a subtle chill of suspicion and resentment. Every time I saw his Instagram bio, the bachelor label seemed to mock me, a constant reminder of his unwillingness to acknowledge my presence in his life. And as the days turned into weeks, I found myself increasingly withdrawn, questioning everything, doubting everything. The seed of doubt had grown into a thorny vine, choking the life out of our once vibrant connection. Part 4. Weeks blurred into a monotonous cycle of forced smiles, strained conversations, and increasingly infrequent intimacy. We continued to go through the motions of a relationship, attending parties, going on hikes, even meeting each other's friends for brunch. Everything seemed perfect on the surface, a carefully curated illusion for the outside world. But underneath, the unease festered, a silent, unspoken tension that hung heavy in the air. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that Liam was holding something back. I found myself scrutinizing his every move, analyzing his every word, searching for clues that would confirm my worst fears. Was he spending more time on his phone than usual? Was he being evasive about his whereabouts? Was he suddenly showering more attention on his dog, as a way to deflect from his own guilt? I knew it was pathetic, that I was descending into a spiral of paranoia and insecurity, but I couldn't help myself. The nagging doubt, fueled by the persistent bachelor bio, had taken root in my mind, and I was powerless to stop it from growing. I started creeping on his Instagram, obsessively refreshing his profile, scrolling through his photos, searching for any sign that he was secretly talking to other women. I knew it was a toxic habit, a self-destructive cycle of anxiety and obsession. But I couldn't resist the urge to snoop, to pry, to try to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. One day, as I was mindlessly scrolling through his latest post, a charming photo of him and his dog at the beach, captioned with a string of generic hashtags, I noticed something that made my heart sink. A comment from a woman I didn't recognize. Her username was Sierra Sunrise, and her profile picture was a glamorous headshot of a woman with long, flowing blonde hair and piercing blue eyes. The comment itself was innocuous enough, just a string of fire emojis. But something about it felt flirty. The casual confidence, the blatant display of admiration, the sheer audacity of leaving such a comment on my boyfriend's Instagram page. It felt like a calculated move, a subtle assertion of her presence, a blatant challenge to my claim on Liam. I clicked on her profile, and my heart plummeted. Sierra Sunrise feed was a carefully curated collection of glamorous photos, showcasing her jet-setting lifestyle, her impeccable fashion sense, and her undeniable beauty. She was a model, an influencer, everything I wasn't. And to my horror, I discovered that she was also following Liam. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The bachelor bio, the fire emoji, the glamorous model following him on Instagram. It all added up to one inescapable conclusion. Liam was keeping his options open. He was flirting with other women, leading them on, all while pretending to be devoted to me. He was a liar, a cheat, a master of deception. A wave of anger washed over me, so intense it almost blinded me. I wanted to confront him, to scream at him, to demand an explanation. But I knew that if I did that, I would just be playing into his hands. He would dismiss me as being too sensitive, as usual, and I would end up feeling even worse. Instead, I decided to bide my time, to gather my evidence, to plan my revenge. I would expose him for the liar that he was. I would show him that I wasn't someone to be trifled with. And I would make him regret the day he ever decided to leave that stupid bachelor bio on his Instagram profile. Part 5. The confrontation had to be perfect. I couldn't just burst out in a fit of rage, spewing accusations like a scorned lover in a bad rom-com. No, I needed to be strategic, calculated, and ice-cold. I needed to expose Liam's deception in a way that would leave him speechless and utterly humiliated. I spent the next few days gathering my ammunition. I screenshot the fire emoji comment. I compiled a list of all the instances where Liam had been evasive or secretive about his phone activity, and I even managed to find a few old DMs between him and Sierra Sunrise that hinted at a flirtatious exchange. I felt like a private investigator, piecing together a complex puzzle of lies and half-truths. That night, I invited Liam over for dinner. I cooked his favorite meal, homemade pasta carbonara, a dish he always raved about, and I even bought a bottle of expensive wine, the kind he only reserved for special occasions. I wanted him to feel comfortable, relaxed, completely unsuspecting of the storm that was about to break. As we ate, I pretended to be happy, engaged, and blissfully unaware. I laughed at his jokes, I listened attentively to his stories about his latest audition, and I even complimented his beige sweater. But inside, my heart was pounding, my hands were shaking, and my mind was racing. Finally, after we had finished eating and the wine had started to flow, I took a deep breath and launched my attack. So, I said, my voice casual but firm, I was looking at your Instagram the other day, and I noticed something interesting. He looked up, his brow furrowed in confusion. Oh? What's that? I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshot comment from Sierra Sunrise. This, I said, pointing to the fire emojis. Who is Sierra Sunrise, Liam? He rolled his eyes, his go-to-defense mechanism when he was cornered. Ali, seriously? We're doing this again? You're getting worked up over a fire emoji. Don't play dumb, Liam, I said, my voice hardening. I know she's not just some random follower. I know you've been talking to her. I want to know who she is, and I want to know what's going on. He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly tousled hair. She's just a friend, he said, his voice laced with irritation. I met her at an audition a few months ago. We're not doing anything. A friend who leaves fire emojis on your photos? I challenged, raising my eyebrows. A friend who you've been secretly DMing behind my back? He hesitated, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. Okay, fine, he admitted, his voice dropping to a whisper. She's a friend who's interested. But I haven't done anything, I swear. I would never cheat on you. But you haven't exactly discouraged her either, have you? I said, the truth hitting me like a physical blow. That bachelor bio? It's not just a joke, is it? It's a signal. It's a way of letting other women know that you're still on the market, that you're still available. He looked down, avoiding my gaze, his face flushed with guilt. I didn't think it was a big deal, he mumbled. I didn't think you'd notice. It's a huge deal, Liam, I said, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. It means you haven't been honest with me. It means you haven't been fully committed to this relationship. And it means that I was right all along. You're not over being a bachelor. And maybe you never will be. I stood up from the table, my hands trembling, my eyes filled with tears. I'm done, Liam, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I can't do this anymore. I can't be with someone who's not completely honest with me, someone who's still clinging to a fantasy of being single and available. I grabbed my purse and walked towards the door, leaving him standing there alone in his perfectly decorated apartment with his half-eaten pasta carbonara and his expensive bottle of wine. As I reached for the doorknob, I paused and turned back to face him. Oh, and one more thing, I said, my voice laced with sarcasm. You might want to update your Instagram bio. It's a little misleading. Then I walked out the door, leaving him standing there alone, with his bachelor bio and his fire emoji girl. And as I walked, I knew one thing for sure. I might be too sensitive, but I wasn't stupid. I deserved someone who was willing to commit, someone who was proud to be with me, someone who wasn't afraid to show the world that he was taken. And Liam, with his carefully curated online persona and his persistent need to remain a bachelor, simply wasn't that person. The taste of the carbonara turned bitter in my mouth. The next relationship would be Instagram-free, that I promised myself. Part 1. The celebration. The hall was filled with warmth and laughter, like something out of a storybook. Twinkling lights hung from the ceiling like tiny stars, and a giant paper snowman smiled from the far wall, watching over the chaos of children in party clothes darting between balloon arches and cookie tables. It was the annual winter gift party, something the neighborhood association had organized every December. A way to bring the community together, to make sure every child got something special, regardless of their family's situation. Lily had been talking about it for days. She'd worn her favorite dress, the blue one with silver snowflakes on the hem, and clutched her little handmade card for Santa like it was a treasure map. Her cheeks were flushed from excitement and sugar, and her curls bounced every time she skipped a step. I remember thinking how beautiful she looked. How happy. Volunteers in red sweaters stood by a decorated tree, calling out names from a list as they handed each child a wrapped gift. Eli Thompson, Jada Kim, Noah Rodriguez. Each name was followed by cheers and clapping. The rustling of paper, the proud squeals of delighted children holding up toy fire trucks, dolls that blinked, boxes that made noise and lit up. Parents snapped photos. Some even cried. Lily gripped my hand tighter every time a name was called. Her eyes were wide, shimmering with anticipation. That's not me, right? She whispered once after a girl ran past us holding a singing unicorn. No, not yet, I smiled. Soon. But soon never came. The stack of gifts grew smaller and smaller. I kept waiting to hear it, Lily Carter, waiting for her moment. But then one of the volunteers clapped her hands and said, "That's the last of them. Thank you, everyone, and happy holidays." The crowd erupted into applause. Some kids began playing with their new toys on the floor. Others rushed to show their parents. And Lily just stood there, her hands still in mine, her smile frozen. She turned to me slowly. They didn't call my name. Part 2. The silence. For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. I just kept looking at the empty space under the tree, once overflowing with packages, now bare except for some bits of torn wrapping paper and a crooked ribbon. Around us, the room buzzed with celebration. Children showed off their gifts to each other, forming instant friendships over remote-controlled cars and light-up fairy wings. Parents laughed, snapped group photos, and wiped away joyful tears. But all I could hear was the ringing in my ears and Lily's quiet voice repeating, "They didn't call my name." I bent down to her level, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "I'm sure there's a mix-up, baby. Let me go ask." She nodded, too trusting. I gave her a quick hug and told her to wait by the snack table, where the cookie trays were now mostly crumbs. I made my way to the front of the hall, weaving between chairs and strollers, until I found one of the volunteers, a kind-looking woman with glasses and a clipboard. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "My daughter, Lily Carter, didn't get called. Could you check the list?" She blinked, then smiled apologetically and flipped through a few pages. "What's the last name again?" "Carter. Lily Carter. She's 6. Blue dress." The woman's eyes scanned the sheet once, then twice. Her smile slowly faded. I'm really sorry. I don't see her name here. Are you sure you registered? My mouth went dry. Yes. I filled out the form 2 weeks ago. I even got a confirmation email. She frowned. Would you be able to show me that? I reached into my bag, digging for my phone with trembling fingers. But before I could find the email, she gently said, I believe you. But we don't have any extra gifts left. Her voice was soft, kind, but final. I stood there stunned, while the party went on around me, parents chatting, children laughing, music playing softly in the background. I felt a strange mix of embarrassment and something deeper, a gnawing feeling in my gut I couldn't quite name yet. When I turned around, I saw Lily still standing at the snack table, her little hands folded neatly in front of her. Still waiting. She hadn't cried. She hadn't said a word. But her smile was gone. Part 3. The Whisper. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked back toward Lily, rehearsing what I would say in my head. Something gentle, something to keep her from feeling what I was starting to feel. That something was off. She looked up at me, her face trying to read mine. I forced a smile, knelt down beside her, and brushed a crumb from her cheek. They said there was a mistake, I whispered. But Daddy's going to check something, okay? Just wait with me for a few minutes. She nodded solemnly. She didn't ask more. She just stood close and reached for my hand. Across the room, I saw my husband near the back entrance. He had been helping one of the staff clean up folding chairs and carry trash bags out to the alley. I caught his eye. He gave me a questioning look, and I tilted my head slightly, a silent signal between us, born from years of parenting. Something's wrong. He came over quickly, and I told him what had happened in a low voice. His jaw tightened. She's not on the list? That doesn't make sense. I double-checked the registration myself. Then he paused. His brow furrowed in a way I didn't like. Actually, what? I asked. He glanced over his shoulder. When I was backstage helping earlier, I saw a box, like a separate one. Not with the rest of the gifts. It had envelopes in it. I thought it was for the volunteers or something, but his voice trailed off and I could see the shift in his posture, like something was clicking into place for him. Something he hadn't said yet. I'm going to check it again, he said quietly. Stay here. He disappeared behind the stage curtains before I could stop him. Lily leaned her head against my side, and I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. The room had begun to thin out, people saying their goodbyes, packing up strollers, carrying kids half asleep from sugar crashes. But for us, the world had narrowed to a quiet, still point. Just me, my daughter, and a growing unease I couldn't quite put a name to. Minutes passed. 5, maybe 10. Too long. And then finally I saw him. He stepped out from behind the curtain, looking pale, his lips pressed into a tight line. In his hand, he held a single envelope. Plain. White. No ribbon, no name. He walked up to us slowly. Someone left this, he said. At the bottom of the box. He didn't hand it to Lily. He handed it to me. Part 4. The envelope. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Not in weight, but in meaning, as if it carried something we weren't meant to hold. There was no name. No return address. Just a faint crease along the edge, like someone had folded and unfolded it more than once before deciding to seal it for good. I looked up at my husband. Who put this there? I asked. He shook his head. I don't know. No one saw who dropped it off. It wasn't with the regular gift pile. It was in a separate box, tucked under some wrapping paper. Lily stood by, watching us both quietly, sensing the shift in the room. I knelt down beside her again, smiling softly, for her, not for myself, and said, Why don't you go get another cookie, sweetie? Just one. She hesitated, then nodded and walked toward the snack table, her little shoes clicking softly on the tile. As soon as she was out of earshot, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single photograph. I stared at it, not fully understanding what I was seeing. Not at first. It was a photo taken from outside our house. A nighttime shot. Our living room window glowed warmly in the frame, just like it did every evening when we read bedtime stories together. And in the photo, standing in the glow of that window, was Lily, She was brushing her doll's hair, smiling, oblivious to the camera watching her from the darkness. I felt a chill rise up my spine, even as my fingers trembled. I flipped the photo over. There was a note, scrawled in unsteady handwriting. "She's not forgotten. She's chosen." I looked at my husband. "What the hell is this?" I whispered. He took the photo from my hand, studied it, and all the color drained from his face. "That handwriting," he said slowly. "I think I know who this is from." My heart skipped. "What are you talking about?" He didn't look at me. His eyes stayed locked on the photo. "It's my brother." Part 5, The Choice. For a moment, I didn't understand. I just stared at him, waiting for him to say it was a mistake, a joke, anything else. But he didn't. Instead, he looked around, as if the walls had ears, then leaned closer. "It's him. I'm sure of it. That handwriting, that message. It's exactly like the ones he used to leave when we were kids. Obsessive, cryptic, possessive." I couldn't find the words. My mouth was dry, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Your brother," I finally managed. "The one who—" "Yes," he interrupted. "The one who disappeared. After the incident." I remembered now. The family stories told in whispers. The uncle Lily never met. The one who was troubled, then gone. I'd always thought it was a drug thing, or maybe mental illness. I hadn't asked questions, but now I wished I had. He looked at me, his voice trembling. He was obsessed with fate, with symbols, with choosing. Said the world needed to be purified by making the right people disappear. My skin crawled. "Why her?" I asked. "Why Lily?" He shook his head, almost in disbelief. "I don't know. But this isn't random. He knows where we live. He's been watching. He didn't forget her, he planned this." I looked over at Lily, who was still at the cookie table, carefully selecting the last sugar star from the plate. She was completely unaware of the storm that had just shifted the ground beneath her life. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. This wasn't over. This was just the opening move. Someone had chosen her. Not for a gift, but for something else. Something we hadn't yet seen. My husband and I stood in that half-empty hall, surrounded by the laughter of other people's children, clutching an unmarked envelope that had turned our world upside down. And I knew, whatever this was, whatever he wanted, we had to be ready. Because he was watching. And he was waiting. Part 6, The Visitor. We didn't sleep that night. Lily curled up between us in our bed, hugging her stuffed rabbit, oblivious to the way our hands never let go of her. We listened to every creak in the house, every gust of wind outside, as if expecting someone to knock at any moment. The photo lay on the kitchen table, inside a Ziploc bag, my husband's idea, in case we needed to take it to the police. We hadn't yet. Neither of us could explain why. Maybe it was fear of not being believed. Maybe it was guilt for ignoring the warning signs, for letting our guard down. But deep down, I think we both knew the truth. This wasn't something the police could fix. That morning, while Lily watched cartoons in the living room, my husband pulled down a battered cardboard box from the top shelf of the hallway closet. It was filled with old papers, yellowed photographs, and an unopened letter that had never been mailed. He placed the letter in my hands. "From him," he said. The last thing he sent before he vanished. I opened it. Inside was a single sentence written in the same erratic scrawl. "One day I'll find the right one. The one who sees." It made no sense, but it felt like a code. A threat wrapped in prophecy. That evening it happened. Just after sundown, there was a knock at the door. Not loud, not rushed. Just 3 slow, deliberate knocks. My heart seized. My husband rushed to the door, looked through the peephole, then froze. "It's a woman," he said, confused. I looked too. She was standing perfectly still on our porch, tall, with a dark wool coat and a long scarf that nearly covered her face. She held something under her arm. A small square package. I opened the door just enough to speak. "Can I help you?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes were pale and sharp, locked onto mine like she already knew who I was. Then she said, I was told to deliver this. For Lily. I glanced at the package. No name. No markings. Who sent it? I asked. Her voice didn't waver. You already know. I stepped out and shut the door behind me. If you come near my daughter. I'm not here to harm her, she interrupted. I'm here to prepare you. For what? She looked me dead in the eye. For the choice you'll have to make. Then she handed me the package, turned around, and walked down the steps into the fog. She never looked back. Part 7. The Package and the Past. I stood on the porch, watching the woman disappear into the thickening fog until there was nothing left but silence and the faint outline of her footprints on the frost-covered path. The package in my hands was surprisingly light, almost empty, but the weight of it, of what it could mean, made my fingers go numb. I came back inside, bolted the door, and set the box on the table. My husband stood nearby, arms folded, as if his body alone could shield us from whatever was coming. Lily peeked in from the living room. Who was that, Mommy? No one important, sweetheart, I said gently. Just someone with the wrong address. She returned to her cartoons. I looked at my husband. Open it with me. He nodded. We peeled back the paper slowly. No tape. Just a simple fold, like it had been wrapped by hand carefully. Inside was a small wooden box, unvarnished, the kind you might find at an old craft market. No luck. Just a sliding lid. Inside were 3 things. A single black feather. Smooth, glossy. Raven, maybe. Clean. Out of place. An old library card. The name on it was nearly faded. Thomas Carter. A cassette tape. A cassette. As if we still lived in the 90s. Tom, my husband whispered. His voice cracked when he said the name. That was his. He reached for the library card and turned it over. On the back was a note, hastily scribbled in pencil. He told me she'd understand. That she'd hear it. I looked at the tape. Do we even have anything to play this on? He nodded slowly. There's an old Walkman. In the garage. He left to get it, and while he was gone, I stared at the feather. It lay like a warning inside the box. Elegant, dark, and deliberate. When he returned and clicked the tape in, there was nothing at first but static. Then a voice crackled through. Rough. Hoarse. Familiar to him. Unknown to me. If you're hearing this, it means the wheel is turning again. It took years to find her, but I saw the signs. She's not like the others. She sees. You may not know it yet, but she will. Soon. They'll come for her. One by one. You can stop it. But not by running. You'll have to choose. One path saves her. The other. The voice trailed off, and for a moment there was silence. Then it returned, softer. I'm not doing this to hurt her. I'm doing this to finish what they started with me. The gift isn't danger. The gift is truth. Click. Silence. My husband took off the headphones and sat down slowly, his eyes hollow. When we were kids, he said, voice low, Tom used to say he was born with something in his head, a voice, a feeling, I don't know. Our parents thought it was mental illness, but he swore it wasn't. He believed he could see patterns in people, like threads. Threads? I asked. Of fate. He said he could see when someone was meant to die, or be saved, like their future was already decided. But sometimes, rarely, a person would show up with threads twisted around them, unpredictable. Chosen. Dangerous. And you think Lily is? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because deep down, I was starting to see it too. And now someone else had seen it first. Part 8, she sees. It started with the mirror. A few days after the package arrived, everything seemed almost normal. We stuck to routines. Breakfast, cartoons, afternoon walks, bedtime stories. But Lily had grown quieter. Not withdrawn, just watchful. As if something inside her was listening to the world more than we were. One morning, while I was folding laundry in the bedroom, she came to me and asked, Mommy, why is the woman in the mirror not looking at me? I froze. She was standing in front of the old vanity mirror, staring straight into it. And in the reflection, yes, everything appeared normal. Her, the room, me behind her. But Lily wasn't looking at herself. She was looking slightly off to the side, like something else was there. What woman? I asked. She said it calmly without fear. The one with the long dark braid. She's smiling but not moving. And her eyes, they don't blink. I walked to the mirror. There was no one there. Just us. But Lily kept staring, her eyes wide and fixed. She says she knows who I am. But you can't hear her. I gently took her hand. It was cold, unnaturally cold, like she'd been holding ice. Lily, sweetheart, look at me. There's no one there. Just you and me, okay? She nodded. But slowly, like she was only agreeing because she knew I wouldn't understand. Later, during lunch, she doodled something onto a napkin. A strange figure made of overlapping lines, surrounded by rings. What's that? I asked. She does this in the air when I fall asleep. She says it's important. I took the napkin. When my husband saw the drawing, he went pale. He got up, went to the closet, and returned with an old spiral notebook from the box his brother had left behind. There, on one of the yellowed pages, was the exact same symbol. Not similar. Identical. We exchanged a look. He whispered, "She's seeing the same things he did." That night, at 3:14 a.m., I woke up to Lily's voice. She was standing by her bedroom window, whispering. At first, I thought she was sleep-talking. But when I got closer, she turned suddenly and said, "He's out there, by the trees." He said he's not alone. He brings other people's dreams. I looked out the window. Dark. Still. But in the shadows at the back of the yard, something moved, not with the wind, but against it. Like a shadow deciding to become real. Then Lily added, calmly, dreamily. He said I have to choose soon. Part 9, The Choice. The days that followed were fractured. As if reality no longer moved in a straight line. Lily kept drawing the same symbol, in salt on the table, with her finger on the fogged bathroom mirror, once even carved lightly into her toast with a butter knife. We tried to act normal. School. Groceries. Walks. But at night, we'd hear her murmuring in her sleep, not in her voice, but in another, deeper tone. As if someone else was speaking through her. And the dreams. She started telling us about the dreams. A long hallway of mirrors that whispered, a dark garden where faces bloomed from the soil, a man without a mouth pointing to a burning swing set. Each dream ended the same way. She stood before a door. And behind it, she said he was waiting. The man with threads. The one who had chosen her. On the 7th night, we woke up to find Lily gone. Her bed was still warm. Her stuffed rabbit on the floor. The front door was open. We ran into the yard, calling her name, and there she stood, barefoot in the middle of the lawn, dressed in her nightgown, hair tangled in the wind. She turned slowly as we approached, her eyes distant, unfocused. He says it's time, she whispered. He says I have to choose now. What choice? I begged. Tell me what you mean, Lily. She looked up at me with a clarity I hadn't seen in days. He said I can go with him, and nothing will happen to you. Or I can stay, and he'll open the door anyway. Her father knelt in front of her. No. No one's taking you. You don't have to choose. But I already did, she said softly. And then she pointed, not at us, not at the house, but behind us. We turned. There, at the edge of the trees, stood a man. Tall. Motionless. Face in shadow. A long coat fluttering slightly in the wind. He didn't move. He didn't need to. We knew it was him. Lily stepped forward, but I pulled her back. No, I said. No one is taking my daughter. But the man didn't come closer. Instead, he raised his hand, slowly, and placed one finger over where his mouth should be. Silence. And Lily said, "He's not here to take me. He's here to wait." The choice was never about now. It was about later. The man turned and walked into the woods. And Lily fainted. She's been fine since then. Doctors say she's healthy. She laughs. Plays. Sleeps through the night. She says she doesn't remember what happened. Or the dreams. But every now and then, she still draws that same symbol. And in the mirror, just for a second, I still see something move not quite with her. And sometimes I wake in the middle of the night with a cold certainty in my chest. Because now I understand what he meant. What she meant. The real choice hasn't come yet, but it will. And when it does, we'll all know what she really sees. My friends, please subscribe to my channel, like the video, and write a comment, and we begin. Part 1. The Facebook snafu expanded. The air in the digital world, as anyone who has lived in the 21st century can attest, can be simultaneously a source of connection and profound disconnection. I was scrolling through Facebook, the usual mindless ritual, the endless stream of curated realities, when it hit me. Or rather, when my parents Karen and Tom unwittingly struck the blow. My high school reunion. 10 years. A decade since graduation from Westview High. I wasn't eagerly anticipating it. I wasn't a popular kid. I hadn't experienced a dramatic glow-up, and the memories of those awkward teenage years often felt best left undisturbed. It wasn't that I hated my high school experience. It just wasn't something I actively craved revisiting. The curiosity, though, was undeniable. I wanted to see how everyone had turned out. Had the shy kids blossomed? Had the rebels found their place? Had my classmates achieved the dreams we'd scribbled in yearbooks? And let's be honest, I was a little curious to see if anyone was talking about me, even in passing. Then I saw it, a Facebook post from my mom. It was a screenshot, a snapshot of the reunion's website, a platform of shared memories and future aspirations, and I felt like I was missing from the frame. In a public forum, she'd written, "So excited to see all the Westview High alums at the beach house. Gonna be a blast." Westview High alums? The comment was followed by a string of emojis and hashtags that all implied the same meaning, the same exclusive circle of privilege. Beach house. The beach house was the ultimate status symbol, the pinnacle of success, and something I had seen my parents use over and over. It was a lavish oceanfront property on the coast of Connecticut, a place where they hosted lavish parties and rubbed elbows with their affluent friends. My mind was swimming. I hadn't received an invitation. Not via email, not through a phone call, not even a passing mention during our infrequent phone calls. Why not? It was my graduating class, after all. I scrolled through the comments. Everyone was chiming in, expressing their excitement, offering their congratulations to my parents for hosting. People were thanking Karen and Tom for opening their home, making plans to bring potluck dishes, and reminiscing about old times, about the things they had in common. It was like I was invisible, a ghost in my own past. A wave of hurt, sharp and sudden, washed over me, a familiar sting I had experienced many times before. I was used to being overlooked, to being compared unfavorably to my golden boy brother, Jason, the one who fulfilled all of their dreams. I sent my mom a private message, hoping to clear up the confusion, hoping there had been some sort of mistake, some oversight. I truly hoped that I would be able to be a part of this get-together. "Hey, Mom," I wrote, trying to keep my tone light and friendly. "I didn't know you were hosting the reunion. Why didn't I get an invite? Was there some sort of mix-up?" Her reply, delivered with the cold efficiency of a digital slap, came almost instantly, like a harsh notification, delivered without mercy. "Honey, we didn't think you'd be interested. Besides, it's a small gathering, and we wanted to keep it to people who were close in high school. No offense." No offense? The phrase stung, a hollow platitude that masked the deeper truth. This wasn't about convenience or space limitations. It was a deliberate act of exclusion, a clear message that I wasn't considered worthy of sharing in their world. This was my graduating class. And my own parents, the people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally, were intentionally excluding me. My mind began to wonder if I was a bad person. A bad daughter. The simmering anger, which had been lurking beneath the surface, suddenly flared, igniting a burning rage. They didn't want me there. They were embarrassed by me. And it hurt more than I would have ever expected. This was no casual oversight. It was a calculated snub, a reminder of all the ways I had failed to live up to their expectations. They would regret it, I knew. Part 2. The unspoken truth expanded. The sting of my mom's words lingered in the air, a bitter aftertaste that colored everything. The exclusion from the reunion wasn't just a social slight. It was a symptom of a deeper, more complex problem, a lifetime of unmet expectations and unspoken resentments. The truth was, my parents, Karen and Tom, had never been particularly proud of me. I wasn't the golden child, the one who brought them prestige and accolades. That honor belonged to my older brother, Jason, the star athlete with the perfect grades, the charismatic leader who excelled at everything he put his mind to. He was destined for greatness, according to my parents, and he had delivered on their every expectation. He went to an Ivy League school, pursued a traditional, lucrative career, and married a woman who fit perfectly into their social circle. He was everything they had ever wanted. I, on the other hand, was different. I wasn't a rebel or a troublemaker, but I was definitely unconventional, a creative spirit who marched to the beat of her own drum. I was artistic, drawn to the world of color, form, and expression. I found beauty in the mundane, and I sought to capture it through my photography and design. I wasn't the type of person my parents are comfortable with. I had struggled in high school, not because I wasn't intelligent, but because I wasn't interested in the rigid structure of the traditional academic path. I found the subjects boring, the expectations suffocating. I longed for the freedom to explore my passions, to express my creativity, to follow my own path. I'd even been considered weird at points, a label that both alienated me from my peers and solidified my parents' disapproval. After graduation, while Jason was climbing the corporate ladder, securing his future in the real world, I was backpacking through Europe, camera in hand, building my freelance business, embracing the freedom of a life lived on my own terms. I traveled, explored new cultures, and documented my experiences through my art. It was a time of self-discovery, a period of growth and transformation, but my parents disapproved. They saw my choices as a waste of potential, a sign of irresponsibility, a betrayal of the opportunities they had worked so hard to provide. They constantly told me I was wasting my talents, that I needed to get a real job, a stable, predictable career that would provide financial security and social validation. They compared me unfavorably to Jason, highlighting my lack of accomplishments and my unconventional lifestyle. "You're so talented, Ashley," my mom would say, her voice laced with a mixture of pride and disappointment. "But you need to focus. You need to be practical. You need to think about your future." Over the years, the distance between us had grown, fueled by their disapproval and my own growing resentment. I tried to bridge the gap, to share my experiences, to explain my choices. I made many attempts to create a connection between us, to get them to understand my values. But they always seemed to judge me, to compare me to Jason, to remind me that I wasn't living up to their expectations. They saw my artistic pursuits as a hobby, not a viable career path. They dismissed my freelance work as unreliable, and they worried about my financial independence and my lack of traditional success. I was always the odd one out. Their beach house was their status symbol, their pride and joy, a testament to their hard work and their social standing. It was a place where they entertained their friends, flaunted their wealth, and reinforced their place in the upper echelons of their community. And they didn't think I was worthy of sharing it with them, of being a part of their exclusive world. The Facebook post, the exclusion from the reunion, was just the latest manifestation of their disapproval, a painful reminder of the chasm that separated us. It was a message, loud and clear, that I didn't belong, that I wasn't good enough. I wanted revenge. Part 3. The Secret Project expanded. Beneath the surface of my seemingly nomadic, artistic life lay a shrewd and disciplined mind. What my parents dismissed as a flighty, irresponsible existence was actually a carefully constructed plan, a long-term project fueled by my passion and driven by my desire to prove them wrong. What my parents didn't know was that I had been secretly and diligently working on a project for the past few years, a project that had finally, gloriously, come to fruition. I had always been good with technology, a quick learner, a problem solver. My freelance work, initially a means of survival, had evolved into a thriving business, encompassing photography, web design, and digital marketing. My skill set allowed me to be financially stable, if not well off. I had mastered the art of online freelancing, building a strong portfolio, cultivating relationships with clients around the world, and earning a reputation for quality and reliability. I could create content and designs for all mediums. From small startups to large corporations, they valued my skills and my unique artistic vision. And, unlike what my parents assumed, The pay was steady and abundant. I wasn't just living paycheck to paycheck, as they so often feared. I was saving, investing, and planning for my future. I taught myself about personal finance, reading books, attending online courses, and consulting with financial advisors. I understood the power of compound interest, the importance of diversification, and the art of making my money work for me. I had always dreamed of owning a home, a place to call my own, a sanctuary where I could create, relax, and express my artistic vision without the constant judgment of my parents. A space that I could fully and confidently call my own. I realized the value of financial independence and the freedom that came with owning property. I decided to focus on my passion, photography and design, not just as a source of income, but as a tool for building wealth. So, a few years ago, I had started researching real estate, driven by a desire for security and a burning need to prove my parents wrong. I spent countless hours online, poring over listings, analyzing market trends, and studying zoning regulations. I researched the areas near my parents' place, but made sure that my interest was not traceable. I was looking for undervalued properties with potential, hidden gems that others had overlooked. I wasn't interested in buying a cookie-cutter house in a suburban development. I wanted something unique, something with character, something that reflected my own artistic sensibility. And then I found it, a dilapidated beach house in a prime location, overlooking the ocean with stunning panoramic views. It was a fixer-upper, in dire need of repairs and renovations, a property that most buyers would have dismissed as a lost cause. But I saw its potential. I saw the beauty hidden beneath the layers of neglect and decay. And the price was right, significantly lower than comparable properties in the area, thanks to its dilapidated condition. I poured my heart and soul into the project, working tirelessly to transform the rundown shack into a stunning modern beach house, a work of art that reflected my own unique vision. I used all the resources I had acquired to make this dream come true. I designed the interiors myself, incorporating natural materials, clean lines, and a minimalist aesthetic. I wanted to create a space that was both functional and beautiful, a place that inspired creativity and fostered relaxation. I chose calming colors, sourced unique pieces of furniture, and incorporated my own photographs into the decor. I hired local contractors to handle the structural repairs and oversee the construction, carefully vetting each one to ensure their competence and reliability. I learned about building codes, plumbing, electrical wiring, and all the other intricacies of home renovation. It was a crash course in construction management. It was challenging, demanding, and at times overwhelming, but I persevered, driven by my vision and fueled by my determination to prove my parents wrong. Every setback, every obstacle, only made me more determined to succeed. Finally, after years of hard work, meticulous planning, and unwavering dedication, the beach house was complete, a testament to my creativity, my resilience, and my unwavering belief in myself. It was more than just a house. It was a symbol of my independence, my success, and my triumph over adversity. My parents had written me off as a failure, but I was about to prove them wrong in the most spectacular way possible. Part 4. The unexpected visitor expanded. The week of the reunion, the anticipation, both the excitement and the anxiety, had reached its peak. I was preparing for my housewarming party, ensuring everything was in place, and the guest list was finalized. Then the phone rang. The caller ID displayed my parents' number. My heart skipped a beat. I hesitated for a moment, knowing this could be a trap. I knew they had seen my posts, and now they would probably see what I did. But I answered. "Hey, Ashley," my dad said, his voice unusually hesitant, almost nervous. I could feel a slight tremor on his end of the line. It was clear he was out of his element. "We were wondering if you'd be free to come over for dinner tonight. We haven't seen you in a while." It was a trap. I knew it instinctively. They wanted to gauge my reaction to the reunion snub, to see if I was angry, upset, or if I had been sufficiently chastened by their actions. They were probably worried that they would be exposed. I'd been expecting this, though. I had a plan. I had to play along. I had to appear as though I had been hurt and affected, and then, when the time was right, I would unleash my secret. "Sure, Dad," I said, trying to sound nonchalant casual, as if their invitation was just another Tuesday. Dinner sounds great. I knew they were waiting to see my true reaction. When I arrived at their house, I put on my best poker face. The drive to the house was short, and as I pulled into the driveway, I took a deep breath and composed myself. My parents greeted me with forced smiles and awkward hugs. The atmosphere was tense, and I could feel the unspoken questions, the unspoken accusations, hanging heavy in the air. The house felt different. It was as if the air pressure was more heavy. The tension hung in the air. During dinner, they made small talk, asking about my work, my travels, and my friends. They were clearly trying to assess my level of success, to determine if I was still a disappointment in their eyes. They had been talking to each other earlier to devise a plan to get to the truth about me. They subtly grilled me about my life, my finances, my future plans. They were fishing for information, attempting to gauge my level of success, to determine if I was still a disappointment in their eyes. They didn't try to keep the conversation up for too long. They knew what was coming. As the main course was served, my mom, Karen, her voice now too sweet, brought up the reunion, the topic they were clearly steering towards. She had a gleam in her eye, a spark of self-satisfaction. "So, Ashley," she said, her voice overly sweet, her tone carefully calibrated to sound friendly and casual. "We're really looking forward to seeing everyone at the beach house. It's going to be so much fun. I wonder who else will be joining." "Yeah," I said, taking a slow, deliberate sip of my wine, savoring the moment. "Sounds like a blast." My tone was even, neutral, carefully controlled. I didn't want to show my hand too soon. "You know," my dad Tom chimed in, his tone casual, almost conversational. "We were thinking of putting the beach house on the market soon. It's a lot of work to maintain, and we're getting older." The very words that sealed their fate. The trap was sprung. I had waited long enough. It was time for my moment of truth, for the grand reveal, for the delicious satisfaction of turning the tables. This was my stage. "Oh, really?" I asked, my voice innocent, my eyes wide with feigned interest. "That's interesting because I just bought a beach house." The words hung in the air, a sudden and unexpected bombshell. The sound of cutlery scraping against plates ceased. The conversation died. The atmosphere shifted with electric force. The color drained from my parents' faces. The forced smiles vanished, replaced by expressions of disbelief, confusion, and a hint of fear. Part 5. The beach house reveal expanded. The silence that followed my announcement was deafening. The gentle hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, all the familiar sounds of the house seemed magnified, emphasizing the profound shock that had washed over my parents. The food was untouched, the plates abandoned. The color drained from their faces, leaving them ashen and pale. Their jaws dropped, and they stared at me in stunned silence, their eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief, confusion, and a growing sense of dawning horror. The forced smiles, so carefully constructed, had completely vanished, replaced by a vulnerability that I had rarely witnessed. "You, what?" My mom stammered, her voice barely a whisper, her composure completely shattered. She had never been good at hiding her feelings. "I bought a beach house," I repeated, savoring the moment, my voice calm and clear. "It's been a passion project of mine for the past few years, and it's finally finished." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle over them. "It's actually the one right next to yours," I continued, a hint of amusement creeping into my tone, "but much better." I paused again, letting the information, the utter and complete irony, sink in. They had excluded me from their reunion, thinking I wasn't worthy of their beach house, their status, their world. Now, I owned a beach house of my own, and a far more impressive one at that. I had achieved the very thing they valued most: financial success, property ownership, and a life lived on my own terms. "You own that house?" my dad finally managed to ask, his voice laced with a mixture of disbelief, anger, and envy. It was the very house they had dismissed as a rundown eyesore, a property they had barely noticed, a place they had viewed as something they could use someday. They had seen the potential. I had made the potential real. I smiled, a genuine, satisfied smile, the first genuine smile in what felt like years. I had finally won. I had finally proved my parents wrong. Yep, I said. Turns out I'm not such a failure after all. I'll be hosting a party at my beach house, I added, the words hanging in the air like a triumphant flourish. Same weekend as the reunion. You should all stop by. The party I threw was unforgettable, a celebration of my success, my independence, and my newfound freedom. I'd worked so hard on this project, and now it was time to share it with everyone I knew. The next morning, I woke up to a call from my mother. She had been in the house earlier, asking if I would ever invite them to the house. I was hesitant, but now it was her turn to reach out to me. She had to swallow her pride and apologize for her actions. The next few months weren't perfect. There were times that we got into arguments. But now we are a family. News of the beach house spread like wildfire. The reunion attendees, many of whom had known me in high school, were stunned and delighted. They had seen me grow, seen me challenge expectations, and had witnessed my success. Now, they all came to see me. I made sure that my house was filled. They laughed, they danced, they reconnected, and they celebrated my accomplishments. The food was delicious, the music was fantastic, and the atmosphere was electric. Even my brother Jason showed up, his face a mix of admiration and begrudging respect. My parents were left with a deserted party, the echoes of their own exclusion, and the bitter realization that they had severely underestimated their daughter. They had focused on social status and the traditional markers of success, and they had missed the true measure of my character, my resilience, and my artistic vision. The reunion turned into a resounding success and an absolute party, and I had never felt so free. My life was now a beautiful blend of artistic expression and financial freedom. I had become a symbol of hope for those who had felt misunderstood, and I reveled in my newfound confidence. My parents had always been a part of my life, and now I had a place of my own. I still had my own friends, but I had the people that mattered to me the most. Did our relationship change? Absolutely. It was a slow process, filled with awkward conversations and moments of unspoken tension. But over time, my parents began to see me in a new light. They started to appreciate my creativity, my independence, and my unwavering determination. They finally understood that my path, though different from theirs, was still a path to success. The beach house was more than just a stunning property. It was a symbol of my transformation, my journey, and my triumph. The door was still open, but the terms of the relationship had shifted. I was in control now, and I liked it. Part 1. The Thanksgiving dinner had all the hallmarks of a typical family gathering. Forced cheer, awkward silences, and a healthy dose of passive-aggressive commentary. But tonight, the usual holiday rituals felt different, laced with a subtle undercurrent of tension that vibrated just beneath the surface, making the air thick and heavy. And that was my fault. The roast chicken, a centerpiece of the meal, was dry. Terribly dry. The skin was brittle, the meat stringy and flavorless, a culinary disaster that seemed to mock the occasion. You'd think after years of Thanksgiving dinners, my mom, Susan, would have mastered the art of poultry. You'd also think she'd be able to show me some love. But no. After all this time, it was always dry, a consistent failing that was almost impressive in its persistence. And tonight, the dryness was more than just a culinary misstep. It was a tangible metaphor for the strain that was radiating around the dining table, a visual representation of the awkwardness and unease that hung in the air. That was because of my sister, Emily, sat across from me, her usual bubbly energy, her infectious enthusiasm, her signature vivacity, all carefully suppressed, replaced by a forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, a strained expression that failed to mask the worry lines etched around her mouth. She's getting old, and I have nothing to do with it. My dad, Tom, a man of few words and even fewer emotions, chewed with a meticulousness that bordered on aggressive, each bite a deliberate act, each movement a carefully controlled performance. He was not in the mood for anything. It's like he could tell. I, on the other hand, felt like a stranger in my own home. I'd invited them over to my new apartment, a small but perfectly functional space downtown that I'd worked my tail off to afford, a place that represented my independence, my ambition, my escape from the suffocating confines of family expectations. It was a triumph, a testament to my hard work, a physical manifestation of my self-sufficiency. I was also lonely. It was the first real place I'd ever had that felt truly mine. A fresh start, a clean slate, a sanctuary where I could be myself, where I could escape the constant judgment and criticism that had defined my childhood and adolescence. Now, though, with my family seated around my dining table, the apartment felt more like a prison, and the feeling of safety had been violated, stolen from me. Now, it just felt violated. The conversation was stilted, revolving around the usual topics. My job boring, according to my mother, who always saw it as beneath my potential. My dating life non-existent, a source of endless concern and thinly veiled disapproval from my parents, and Emily's impending wedding excruciating, considering the groom, Chad, was a walking, talking khaki pant ad, a bland, predictable, and utterly uninteresting specimen. It was always the same. Every time the conversation lulled, every time the silence threatened to engulf us, I could feel my parents' eyes on me, that familiar mixture of pride for my accomplishments and disappointment for my choices, a combination that always left me feeling both validated and inadequate. I was tired of it. Suddenly, mid-bite of the desiccated chicken, my mom, Susan, always eager to take the lead, her voice overly cheerful, her tone overly bright, breaking the uneasy silence. It didn't feel real. "Oh, honey, speaking of the apartment," she chirped, her voice grating on my nerves. "Emily needs to borrow something. From you. Can you two go grab it?" Her smile was tight, too tight, a forced expression that failed to reach her eyes, betraying the underlying anxiety and the hidden agenda. She looked to be trying to push me out of my comfort zone. It's like they thought that I didn't know better, that I couldn't see through their charade. I did. My gut clenched, a knot of suspicion tightening in my stomach. Something was up. Something wasn't right. I had to show my power. I'd had enough of being pushed around. "Borrow what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, to maintain an air of indifference, but failing to mask the underlying wariness. It was a trap. My world was now a game of chess. Part 2. The question hung in the air, unanswered, suspended in the tension-filled atmosphere like a fragile ornament threatening to shatter. My parents exchanged a quick, furtive glance, a silent communication that spoke volumes, confirming my suspicion that something was amiss. I wanted to hear the end. My dad cleared his throat, a deliberate sound that echoed in the relatively small dining room, his gaze unwavering, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. He was not someone to talk to. "Just something," he said, his voice low and gravelly, his tone evasive, his words deliberately vague. "It's important to Emily." That was the end of it, the final word, the unspoken command that brooked no argument. He didn't give me a chance to speak. My gut clenched tighter, my suspicion escalating, my anxiety mounting. The whole thing felt orchestrated, a carefully plotted scheme designed to manipulate me, to pressure me into compliance. They were planning something. I didn't know what it was. Emily, bless her heart, trapped between her parents' expectations and my growing suspicion, looked as uncomfortable as I felt, her face flushed, her eyes darting nervously between me and her parents, her hands fidgeting in her lap. She was never meant to be a real player. We walked in tense silence to my car, a short but agonizing journey, each step weighted down with unspoken questions and suppressed emotions. I could feel my parents' eyes boring into my back the entire time, scrutinizing my every move, monitoring my reaction, trying to anticipate my next step. The whole room was watching. It was the end of the plan, it seemed. As we drove, the city lights blurring past the windows, the silence inside the car became almost unbearable. I knew that it was time to break the awkwardness and force Emily to tell me what was happening. She needed to be saved. I pressed Emily for answers, my voice laced with urgency, my questions demanding. "Seriously, what's this about? What do you need to borrow? Why can't you just tell me what's going on?" My voice was shaking. Emily wrung her hands, a nervous tic that she always displayed when she was feeling anxious or uncomfortable, her voice barely a whisper, almost lost in the hum of the engine and the rush of traffic. "I don't know exactly," she confessed, her gaze averted, her words hesitant, her expression betraying her discomfort. Mom said it was something for the wedding. She always fell into line. She paused, searching for the right words, struggling to articulate the vague instructions she had been given. Something old, something borrowed. She trailed off, her voice fading into silence. She knew that she was the problem. I frowned, my suspicion deepening, my unease intensifying. Something you can't find at a store or a party supply store? I pressed, my voice laced with skepticism, my question a clear challenge to her flimsy explanation. I felt that she was trying to lead me to doom. Emily shrugged, her shoulders lifting in a gesture of helplessness, her eyes meeting mine for a brief moment before darting away again. She said it was personal. From you. It had to be my fault. When we pulled up to my apartment building, the modern glass and steel structure looming large against the night sky, I noticed something odd, something out of place, something that immediately set off alarm bells in my head. This was new. There was a beat-up sedan parked across the street, a rusty, dented vehicle that looked like it belonged in a junkyard, its windows tinted so dark you couldn't see inside, obscuring any view of the occupants. It looked out of place in the gentrified neighborhood, a stark contrast to the sleek, expensive cars that typically line the streets, and it hadn't been there earlier when I had arrived home from work. Everything was out of place. A shiver ran down my spine, a premonition of danger, a sense of foreboding that told me something was terribly wrong. I needed to know. Part 3. I hate this. Every cell in my body screamed at me to intervene, to stop Emily from walking into what felt increasingly like a carefully laid trap, to grab her, to pull her back into the car, to drive away and never look back. But I fought the impulse, forcing myself to remain still, to observe, to assess the situation before acting. Rash decisions could be deadly. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to turn around, to drive away, to escape this increasingly unsettling situation. But I knew that I couldn't. I knew that Emily was counting on me, that she was relying on me to protect her, even if she didn't realize the danger she was in. I can't get out of here. It was up to me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart, to steady my trembling hands, to suppress the growing sense of panic that threatened to overwhelm me. I had to remain calm, to think clearly, to act rationally. Fear was a luxury I couldn't afford. I sat back in my seat, feigning a nonchalance that I didn't feel, trying to project an air of confidence that I certainly didn't possess. I had to do what needed to be done. Okay, well, go in, I said to Emily, my voice deceptively casual, my words carefully chosen to mask my underlying anxiety. Her face looked startled, her eyes widening with surprise, her brow furrowing with confusion. What, are you not coming? She asked, her voice laced with disbelief, her expression betraying her disappointment and a hint of suspicion. She saw through it all. I shook my head, forcing a smile that felt brittle and unnatural, trying to reassure her that everything was fine, even though I knew that it wasn't. I don't think it is the safest thing to do, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, my words tinged with a subtle warning, hoping she would pick up on my unease. I'd failed her once. Emily rolled her eyes, dismissing my concerns as unfounded, attributing my unease to my overactive imagination, a characteristic she often teased me about. You're being paranoid, she said, her tone dismissive, her attitude condescending. I knew I was, but that wasn't going to stop me from being cautious, from being vigilant, from being prepared for the worst. My instincts were screaming at me, and I couldn't ignore them. Something was very, very wrong. I watched her walk towards the building, her figure silhouetted against the bright lights of the entrance, her movements hesitant, her pace slow, as if she, too, felt a sense of unease. I was not alone. She looked so vulnerable, so unsuspecting, so utterly unaware of the danger that might be lurking just around the corner, a fact that only intensified my anxiety. I need to know that she was safe. She disappeared inside, melting into the shadows of the lobby, leaving me alone in the darkness, consumed by anxiety and fear, my senses heightened, my mind racing, my body tense and ready for action. My place was not home for anyone. It seemed a stark and depressing realization that washed over me, filling me with a profound sense of loneliness and isolation. It's what I told myself to get by. I had never really thought about that before, about the true meaning of home, about the importance of feeling safe and secure, about the value of having a place where you could be yourself, where you could relax and unwind, where you could find comfort and support. All things that I was not. Home, to me, was a safe place, a sanctuary from the outside world, a haven from the stresses and pressures of everyday life, a refuge from the constant judgment and criticism that had defined my past. It did not make sense. I did not like my mind and what I thought, so I had to stop. I didn't feel safe and was ready. Part 4. I didn't feel safe, and the realization hit me like a physical blow, leaving me breathless and disoriented. This apartment, my sanctuary, my refuge, my carefully curated space of independence, had been tainted, violated, contaminated by the presence of something sinister, something that threatened to shatter the fragile sense of security I had worked so hard to create. I didn't want this. I began to be a person I had not planned to be, consumed by fear, driven by paranoia, obsessed with protecting my sister, even if it meant putting myself in harm's way. The weight of responsibility pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. This was all my fault. My hands were shaking, my palms sweating, my heart pounding in my chest like a trapped bird, struggling to escape. I needed to do something, anything, to regain control of the situation, to assert my agency, to reclaim my life. But what? I could not do what was needed. All I wanted was to be here, but it was always someone I didn't understand, someone who threatened my peace of mind, someone who undermined my sense of security, someone who forced me to confront the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of my carefully constructed world. Everything was wrong. The minutes stretched into an eternity, each second ticking by with agonizing slowness, amplifying my anxiety, fueling my paranoia, intensifying my sense of impending doom. I had to do something. I tried to focus on the details, to observe my surroundings, to gather information, to assess the potential threats. The beat-up sedan was still parked across the street, its tinted windows obscuring the occupants, its presence a silent, ominous reminder of the danger that lurked nearby. I saw a shadow come up to my window. The shadow of a man. He was tall and lean. The door was locked, and he was trying to get in. I went into my apartment and just fell onto the floor, a victim of my own fear, paralyzed by anxiety, overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility. I needed to move. I could hear sounds coming from the other room. The man was trying to get in. I closed my eyes. It was needed. Suddenly, my phone rang, the shrill, jarring sound shattering the tense silence, pulling me from my dark thoughts, jolting me back to reality. The world came back, even though it was bad. It was an unknown number, a string of digits that I didn't recognize, a potential threat disguised as an innocuous call. It was probably them. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the phone, torn between the urge to answer and the fear of what I might hear, dreading the inevitable confrontation, dreading the unknown. This could be good, or it could be bad. Then answered, my voice trembling slightly, my words barely audible, my heart pounding in my chest. Hello. It's never good. A deep voice, gravelly and unfamiliar, spoke on the other end, his words carefully chosen, his tone devoid of emotion, his message chillingly clear. I need you to do something for me. If you want your sister to be safe, listen carefully. My heart froze, the blood turning to ice in my veins, my body going numb with fear. He knew. He knew about Emily. He knew about my parents. He knew about everything. They had everything. This was so wrong. It was a death trap. Part 5. The voice on the phone gave me instructions, cold and precise, outlining a series of demands that felt surreal, like something out of a twisted thriller. He spoke with an unnerving calmness that made my blood run cold, his words laced with an implicit threat that sent shivers down my spine. There was nothing I could do. He wanted access to my apartment, a clear path for him to enter and retrieve something he claimed was rightfully his, a request that felt like a violation, a defilement of my personal space, a complete disregard for my safety and my well-being. What was this world, and why was I in it? And he wanted it now, demanding immediate compliance, refusing to brook any delay, leaving me with no time to think, no time to plan, no time to seek help. He was in control, and I was his pawn. I had to do what was necessary. He would give me some money, a paltry sum that barely compensated for the potential danger I was facing, a token payment that felt insulting, a cynical attempt to buy my cooperation, to silence my conscience. And that was it, a clean transaction, a simple exchange, a business deal devoid of any human emotion or empathy. The money didn't matter. Nothing was worth that. It would pay for Emily's wedding, a twisted irony that made my stomach churn, the celebration of her happiness funded by my fear, her joy built upon my sacrifice, her future secured by my compromise. That was not her fault. And that way, things would be done, the situation resolved, the threat neutralized, the danger averted. It was the only way. I would be free of my sister, a selfish thought that flashed through my mind, a momentary temptation to abandon her to her fate, to prioritize my own safety, to escape the responsibility. But I immediately rejected the impulse, knowing that I could never live with the guilt, that I could never forgive myself for abandoning her when she needed me the most. She would be free of me, no longer burdened by my anxieties, no longer constrained by my overprotective nature, no longer exposed to the dangers that seemed to follow me like a shadow. I made it up in my head. It was just a story. I'll never have to come back to this apartment, to this life, to this feeling of dread and isolation. A tempting promise that offered a glimmer of hope, a possibility of escape, a chance to start over, to build a new life, to create a new identity. What I have always wanted. My parents knew all along. The secret was out. Everything was real, and everything was a game. I hated them, and I knew that this man was trying to use my hatred, to exploit my vulnerability, to manipulate me into doing his bidding. The anger swelled up. I needed to get out. The anger swelled up inside me, a burning rage that threatened to consume me, a desire for revenge that simmered beneath the surface, a temptation to lash out, to defy him, to fight back, to reclaim my power. Everything happened too fast. I felt overwhelmed. He began to cry, which told me something, that he was also a victim, that he was also being manipulated, that he was also struggling with his own demons, his own fears, his own vulnerabilities. I can help him. I took a breath, steeling my resolve, pushing aside the fear, suppressing the anger, focusing on the task at hand, clinging to the hope that I could find a way to save Emily, to protect myself, to escape this nightmare. Here we go again. It was time to continue to make things right, to do what was necessary, to take control, to fight back, to reclaim my life. I could save everyone. I made a decision, one that could cost me everything, one that could put me in even greater danger, one that could alter the course of my life forever. But it was the only choice I had, the only option that offered a glimmer of hope. I had to do it. I needed to give him something more than just access to my apartment, something that would satisfy his demands, something that would buy me time, something that would give me an advantage. I did the only thing I could think of. I reached for my gold card, and I called his phone. He answered. I am going to give him everything. I said it all with no hesitation. A man knocked and walked me outside, where it was done. My parents came running out and said the following as I tried to make a run for it. Thank you for giving us the money. It was all we wanted. The card has been used. It is done, but there is someone at the door. This can't be. You are going to get him, I said to my sister. My hand felt warm. She was scared. She laughed. You're crazy. I do what you tell me. I would never get hurt. It was always up to me. Always had been. I walked into my apartment, and there he was, standing in the middle of my living room. His face illuminated by the faint light filtering through the window, his expression unreadable. It was Chad, Emily's fiancé. He was going to get away with everything. Or was he? A police officer jumped in the car. It turned out that Chad was a bad man, and Emily had known all along. The money I gave him was what she wanted, all along. That would be all, though. It can be done. And as the police took Emily, I knew that everything I did was never going to be enough. I let the stranger in the door. I sold her love for everything. I thought she wanted me to have it all. I was wrong. My friends, please subscribe to my channel, like the video, and write a comment, and we begin. Part 1. The hallway seat expanded. The satin strapless dress, a shade of blush pink that Olivia had insisted would perfectly complement my skin tone, felt increasingly like a suffocating straitjacket. I tugged at the bodice, the fabric digging into my ribs, and surreptitiously kicked off one of my ridiculously high heels, wincing at the sharp pain that shot up my leg. 3 hours into my sister's meticulously planned, excessively extravagant wedding, and I was already regretting every single life choice that had led me to this moment. It was Olivia's day, of course. And to be fair, she looked stunning. The epitome of bridal perfection in a gown that probably cost more than my entire apartment. She was radiant, glowing with a happiness that I couldn't quite share, even though I desperately wanted to. But beneath the surface of manufactured joy, a simmering resentment bubbled within me, carefully masked behind a pasted-on smile that was beginning to feel like a permanent fixture on my face. The Blackwood Manor was a monument to old money and ostentatious displays of wealth. The sprawling estate, complete with manicured gardens, a shimmering lake, and an army of impeccably dressed staff, screamed privilege. Ice sculptures of swans adorned the entrance, their glistening forms reflecting the twinkling fairy lights strung across the manicured lawns. Inside, a string quartet played classical melodies, their music adding to the overall air of refined elegance. It was the kind of wedding that belonged on the cover of a glossy magazine, not in the real world. And the seating chart? Well, the seating chart had been peculiar. Downright insulting, to be honest. I had arrived at the reception, a sprawling ballroom filled with elegantly dressed guests, located my name card with a growing sense of unease, and discovered that my designated seat was in the hallway. Not at a table, mind you, surrounded by friends and family. Not even at a slightly less desirable table near the restrooms or the kitchen. No, my seat was a lone, solitary chair positioned against a cold, unforgiving wall in the dimly lit hallway outside the main ballroom. The wall was adorned with portraits of long-dead Blackwood ancestors, their stern, judgmental gazes seeming to follow my every move. At first, I genuinely thought it was a mistake. A misplaced card, a clerical error, a cruel joke played by a disgruntled wedding guest. I envisioned the wedding planner, a tightly wound woman with a permanent headset glued to her ear and an air of thinly veiled exasperation, quickly rectifying the situation, ushering me to a proper table with profuse apologies. But when I nervously approached her, clutching my name card like a lifeline, she barely glanced at me, her eyes scanning the room with a laser-like focus. "Ava," she said, her voice clipped and efficient. "Yes, hallway seat. Perfectly correct. It's all on the chart. Enjoy the celebration." Enjoy the celebration? How could I possibly enjoy the celebration when I was being treated like an unwelcome guest at my own sister's wedding? Humiliated, defeated, and feeling like the world's biggest idiot, I sank into the unforgiving wooden chair, my carefully constructed facade of happiness beginning to crumble. The hallway offered a partial, distorted view of the dance floor, a sliver of the meticulously decorated room filled with laughing guests, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the chandeliers. I could hear snippets of conversation, bursts of laughter, and the rhythmic beat of the DJ's music, but I felt completely isolated, cut off from the celebration, like an exhibit in a museum, forever separated from the vibrant world on the other side of the velvet rope. And then I saw him, the groom, Ethan. He was standing near the dance floor, surrounded by a gaggle of admirers, his handsome face wreathed in a charming smile. He caught my eye, his gaze lingering for a moment longer than necessary. A slow, deliberate smirk spread across his face, a subtle expression that sent a shiver of unease snaking down my spine, chilling me to the bone. Ethan and I had a history. A complicated, messy, and deeply embarrassing history that Olivia knew nothing about. A secret that we had both vowed to keep buried, a memory that haunted my dreams and fueled my insecurities. And that smirk, it wasn't just a smile. It was a power play, a reminder of our shared secret, a subtle threat that made my blood run cold. It was a silent message that said, "I know what you did." And I was terrified of what he might do with that knowledge. Part 2. The whispered secret expanded. The memory of that night with Ethan played out in my mind, an unwanted rerun I couldn't seem to escape. It had been our junior year of college, a hazy, alcohol-fueled evening at a party thrown by our fraternity. I had been nursing a broken heart, fresh from a particularly messy breakup, and Ethan, always the compassionate friend, had offered a listening ear, a shoulder to cry on, and an endless supply of cheap beer. One thing led to another, as it often does in those situations, and the lines between friendship and something more began to blur. We stumbled back to his dorm room, fueled by liquid courage and a desperate need for connection, and made a mistake. A big, messy, regrettable mistake. The details were hazy, fragmented by the alcohol and the years that had passed. But the feeling of shame, of guilt, of having betrayed a trust, remained sharp and vivid. We had crossed a line, violated an unspoken boundary, and irrevocably altered the dynamics of our friendship. The next morning was awkward, filled with mumbled apologies and averted gazes. We swore never to speak of it again, to pretend it never happened, to bury the incident deep within the recesses of our memories, hoping it would simply fade away. We managed to salvage our friendship, but it was never quite the same. The unspoken secret hung between us like a heavy curtain, casting a shadow over our interactions, a constant reminder of our lapse in judgment. Then Olivia came along. She was a freshman, bright-eyed and full of naive optimism. She was instantly smitten with Ethan, captivated by his charm and his effortless charisma. He, in turn, seemed equally enamored with her, drawn to her youthful innocence and her unwavering admiration. I watched their relationship blossom with a mixture of envy and dread, my stomach churning with a complex cocktail of emotions. I was happy for Olivia, of course. She deserved to find love, to experience the joy and fulfillment of a committed relationship. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap, that she was being blinded by Ethan's charm, unaware of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. I tried to warn her, to drop subtle hints about Ethan's past, about his tendencies. I cautioned her to be careful, to take things slow, to really get to know him before making any rash decisions. But she wouldn't listen. She was too blinded by love, too convinced that she had found her Prince Charming, to heed my warnings. "You're just jealous, Ava," she had said, her voice laced with a hint of annoyance. "You're just trying to sabotage my happiness because you're still hung up on Liam." I knew it was futile. I couldn't force her to see what I saw, to understand the complexities of my relationship with Ethan. She had to learn the hard way, to discover the truth for herself. And now, here I was, relegated to the hallway at their lavish wedding, while Ethan, the man who knew my deepest secret, stood at the center of it all, basking in the adoration of my sister and their assembled guests. The injustice of it all was almost unbearable. Later in the evening, as I nursed my lukewarm champagne, trying to avoid eye contact with the Blackwood ancestors staring down at me from the wall, Olivia approached me, her face flushed with happiness, her eyes sparkling with wedding day bliss. "Having fun, Ava?" she asked, her voice a little too loud, her smile a little too wide. "It's lovely, Olivia," I replied, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Everything looks beautiful. You look beautiful." "I'm so glad you could make it," she said, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine. There was a coolness in her gaze, a distance that hadn't been there before. As she turned to leave, she leaned in close, her voice dropping to a bare whisper that sent a chill down my spine. "Ethan told me about you too," she said, her eyes hardening, her smile vanishing completely. "Don't think I don't know what happened between you in college." Then she walked away, leaving me reeling, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing with questions. Ethan had told her? Why? What had he told her? Had he revealed the full extent of our indiscretion? Had he twisted the story to make himself look like the victim? And what did Olivia plan to do with this information? Was she going to confront me, to publicly shame me, to ruin my life? The hallway, already a place of humiliation and isolation, suddenly felt like a prison, trapping me with my secrets and my fears. Part 3. The missing bracelet expanded. The hallway, despite my attempts to ignore it, remained surprisingly active. A constant stream of guests passed by, their laughter and chatter a jarring contrast to the turmoil churning within me. Some were headed to the restrooms, their faces etched with the familiar grimace of too much champagne. Others were seeking refuge on the outdoor patio, drawn to the promise of fresh air and a momentary escape from the wedding festivities. Most of them barely glanced at me, lost in their own conversations and their own wedding-induced bliss, oblivious to my solitary confinement and my growing sense of dread. But one woman stopped, her face etched with genuine concern, her eyes filled with a warmth that cut through the cold detachment of the Blackwood Manor. It was Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, a kind and perceptive woman who had always been a source of support and comfort. She was the only member of my family, besides my grandmother, who had consistently treated me with kindness and understanding, who had never judged me for my life choices or pressured me to conform to their expectations. "Ava, darling," she said, her voice a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. "Are you all right? You look uncomfortable, like you'd rather be anywhere else in the world." I sighed, my carefully constructed facade finally cracking under the weight of my accumulated anxieties. "I'm fine, Aunt Carol," I lied, knowing she wouldn't believe me for a second. She raised a skeptical eyebrow, her eyes searching my face for the truth. "Don't give me that, Ava. I know you better than that. What's going on?" Reluctantly, I confided in her, pouring out my heart in hushed tones, careful not to attract the attention of any prying ears. I told her about my seating arrangement, about Olivia's whispered warning, about the simmering tension between me and Ethan, about the gnawing feeling that something was terribly wrong. Aunt Carol listened patiently, her brow furrowed with concern, her hand resting reassuringly on my arm. She didn't interrupt, she didn't judge, she simply offered a listening ear and a compassionate presence. When I finished, she squeezed my arm gently inside. "Something isn't right here, Ava," she said, her voice low and serious. "I can feel it. There's something off about this whole wedding. Something more than just your sister's usual drama." Then, her eyes widened in sudden realization, her hand flying to her neck in alarm. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice trembling. "My bracelet. It's gone." Aunt Carol was wearing a delicate diamond bracelet, a family heirloom that had been passed down for generations. It was a stunning piece, crafted from platinum and studded with dozens of sparkling diamonds. She had been showing it off earlier in the evening, probably telling anyone who would listen about its history and its value, about how it had been passed down from her grandmother to her mother and then to her. "I had it on just a few minutes ago," she said, her voice frantic, her hands fluttering around her wrist, patting it anxiously. "I was admiring it in the restroom mirror. I must have taken it off to wash my hands and forgotten to put it back on." We sprang into action, retracing Aunt Carol's steps, searching the restrooms, the hallways, the outdoor patio. We questioned the wedding staff, interrogated the guests, but the bracelet was nowhere to be found. The elegant Blackwood Manor, with its air of refined sophistication, had suddenly transformed into a crime scene. As the minutes ticked by and the search proved fruitless, a sense of unease settled over me, deepening the anxiety that had already been plaguing me all evening. This wasn't just a case of a misplaced bracelet. Something sinister was happening at Olivia's wedding, something that went beyond petty theft and sibling rivalry. A dark cloud had descended over the celebration, casting a shadow over the champagne flutes and the perfectly arranged floral centerpieces. And I had a feeling that the missing bracelet was just the tip of the iceberg. Part 4. The security footage expanded. Aunt Carol, understandably distraught and increasingly agitated, insisted on reporting the missing bracelet to the wedding planner. The tightly wound woman, whose name I vaguely recalled, was Brenda, was clearly annoyed by the disruption, her expression conveying a thinly veiled disdain for the situation. "We can't just accuse someone of theft," Brenda huffed, adjusting her headset with a practiced flick of her wrist. "We need proof. And frankly, I doubt anyone at this wedding would stoop to such a thing. These are very respectable people." Aunt Carol, however, was not to be deterred. She argued persuasively, citing the value of the bracelet, its sentimental significance, and the unsettling atmosphere that had permeated the wedding. Finally, after much persuasion and a veiled threat to involve the police, Brenda reluctantly agreed to review the security footage. We gathered in a small windowless office tucked away behind the ballroom, huddled around a flickering monitor, watching grainy, black and white footage of the reception. The office was cramped and stuffy, filled with the stale scent of stale coffee and unfulfilled potential. Brenda, perched on a rolling chair, fast-forwarded through hours of tedious footage, her brow furrowed in concentration. After what felt like an eternity of reviewing blurry images of dancing guests and overflowing buffet tables, we finally found the clip we were looking for. It showed Aunt Carol entering the ladies' restroom, her diamond bracelet sparkling on her wrist. A few minutes later, she emerged, her face slightly flushed, her hands empty. Then, a figure entered the restroom, their face partially obscured by a deep shadow cast by the overhead lighting. They approached the sink, glanced around furtively, their movements quick and furtive, and then reached for the bracelet, which was lying unattended on the counter. The figure hesitated for a moment, their hand hovering over the glittering jewelry, as if wrestling with their conscience. But temptation ultimately prevailed. The figure slipped the bracelet into their pocket and quickly exited the restroom, disappearing into the throng of wedding guests. The footage was too grainy, too poorly lit, to clearly identify the culprit. The figure was tall and slender, wearing a dark suit. The details were indistinct, the features blurred, but the overall impression was unmistakable. A dark suit, like the one Ethan was wearing. Aunt Carol gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her face a mask of disbelief and horror. "It can't be," she whispered, her voice trembling, her eyes wide with shock. "It just can't be. He's marrying my niece. He's a Blackwood now." Doubt gnawed at me, an insidious whisper questioning my own judgment, my own perception of reality. Could Ethan really be capable of such a thing? He had always been charming, charismatic, and undeniably attractive. But there had also always been a darkness within him, a hidden layer of complexity that I had never fully understood. He was a master of disguise, capable of projecting an image of innocence and sophistication while concealing his true nature. Was he truly a con artist, a sociopath, capable of manipulating and deceiving those closest to him? Or was I simply projecting my own insecurities and my own resentments onto him, unfairly judging him based on our shared past and my lingering feelings of guilt and betrayal? I wanted to believe that Ethan was innocent, that the security footage was misleading, that there was some other explanation for the missing bracelet. But deep down, a nagging voice told me that I was wrong, that the evidence was undeniable, that Ethan was not the man everyone believed him to be. He was a thief, a liar, and perhaps something even more sinister. The thought chilled me to the bone, making me question everything I thought I knew about my sister, about my family, and about the world around me. The wedding, already tainted by secrets and resentment, had suddenly become a terrifying and unpredictable game, and I had a feeling that the stakes were about to get much higher. Part 5, The Hallway Confession, expanded and concluded. Armed with the damning security footage, Aunt Carol and I, our faces grim with determination, sought out Olivia. Finding her proved surprisingly difficult. She wasn't on the dance floor, she wasn't mingling with the guests, and she wasn't in the ladies' restroom, reapplying her lipstick and perfecting her bridal glow. After a frantic search, we finally found her huddled in a darkened corner of the outdoor patio, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the moon, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She looked lost, vulnerable, and utterly heartbroken. Aunt Carol and I approached her cautiously, our footsteps echoing across the deserted patio. "Olivia," Aunt Carol said gently, her voice laced with compassion, "we need to talk. It's about Ethan." Olivia looked up, her eyes red and swollen, her makeup smeared across her cheeks. "I don't want to talk about Ethan," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I just want to go home. I want this whole day to be over." "I know this is difficult, darling," Aunt Carol said, "but you need to see this. It's important. It's about the bracelet." We led Olivia back inside the Blackwood Manor, to the same cramped, stale-smelling office where we had reviewed the security footage. As she watched the grainy images play out on the monitor, her face gradually transformed from confusion to shock to disbelief to utter devastation. She initially dismissed the footage as a mistake, a misidentification, a cruel prank. She refused to believe that her beloved Ethan, the man she had vowed to spend the rest of her life with, could be capable of such a thing. She made excuses for him, claiming that the figure in the dark suit must have been someone else, that the security footage was somehow doctored, that we were all jumping to conclusions. But when we pointed out the telltale gait, the distinctive mannerisms, the subtle details that made it undeniably Ethan, her resistance finally crumbled. The dam of denial broke, and a torrent of tears streamed down her face, her body shaking with uncontrollable sobs. "No," she cried, her voice a heartbroken wail. "It can't be true. He wouldn't do that to me. He loves me." "I'm so sorry, Olivia," Aunt Carol said, her voice filled with genuine sorrow. "But the evidence is undeniable. You need to confront him. You need to know the truth." Driven by a mixture of anger, betrayal, and a desperate need for answers, Olivia, her face a mask of anguish, ran to find Ethan. Aunt Carol and I followed close behind, our hearts pounding in our chests, our senses heightened with a mixture of anticipation and dread. We found Ethan in the hallway, pacing nervously back and forth, his face pale, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. He looked guilty, anxious, and utterly terrified. Olivia confronted him, her voice trembling with rage and betrayal. "Did you steal Aunt Carol's bracelet?" she demanded, her eyes blazing with fury. Ethan initially denied it, feigning innocence, feigning surprise. He tried to gaslight her, to manipulate her, to convince her that she was imagining things, that we were all conspiring against him. But Olivia, emboldened by our support and armed with the damning security footage, refused to back down. "Don't lie to me, Ethan," she screamed, her voice growing louder, attracting the attention of nearby guests, their conversations abruptly ceasing, their faces turning towards us with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "I saw the video. I know it was you. Just tell me the truth." Finally, his facade cracked, his carefully constructed image of charming innocence shattered into a million irreparable pieces. He slumped against the wall, his shoulders slumping in defeat, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame and desperation. "Fine. Yes, I took it," he confessed, his voice laced with desperation, his gaze shifting nervously from Olivia to me to Aunt Carol. "I needed the money. I'm in debt. I borrowed from the wrong people, and they're threatening me. I didn't know what else to do." Olivia gasped, her face contorted with pain, her voice cracking with disbelief. "You lied to me," she cried, her eyes filled with a heartbreak that mirrored my own. "Our whole relationship has been a lie. You don't love me. You just wanted my money." Ethan reached out to her, his hand outstretched, his voice pleading. "Olivia, please," he begged. "I can explain. It's not like that. I do love you. I just made a mistake." But Olivia recoiled in disgust, her face contorted with loathing. "Stay away from me," she screamed, her voice echoing through the silent hallway. "I never want to see you again." Then, his gaze, desperate and calculating, landed on me. A familiar smirk, cold and menacing, spread across his face, sending a chill snaking down my spine. "You thought you could get away with it, didn't you, Ava?" he said, his voice dripping with venom, his eyes filled with a malicious glee. "You thought you could expose me, ruin my life. You thought you could finally have your revenge." "Revenge?" Olivia asked, her brow furrowing in confusion, her gaze shifting from Ethan to me. "What are you talking about? What's going on?" Ethan smirked, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "Ava and we have a history," he said, his voice dripping with insinuation, his eyes fixed on me, daring me to deny it. "A secret we've been keeping for years. A secret that would destroy her life if it ever got out. A secret that would make you see her for what she really is." My heart pounded in my chest, my breath caught in my throat. He was bluffing, I told myself. He wouldn't dare reveal our secret, not in front of Olivia, not in front of Aunt Carol, not in front of all these witnesses. He wouldn't risk exposing himself even further, not when he was already teetering on the edge of ruin. But I knew Ethan. I knew his capacity for cruelty, his willingness to do whatever it took to protect himself, even if it meant sacrificing others in the process. He was unpredictable, volatile, and utterly ruthless. And I had no doubt that he would use our secret, our past indiscretion, to hurt me, to destroy me, to tear my life apart. He opened his mouth, ready to unleash the truth, to expose the shame and guilt that had haunted me for years. But before he could speak, before he could utter the words that would irrevocably alter my life and my relationship with my sister, Aunt Carol stepped forward, her voice ringing with an unexpected authority, her eyes blazing with a fierce protectiveness. "Enough, Ethan," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "I know everything. You don't need to say another word." Ethan scoffed, his smirk faltering, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "What do you know, Carol? What could you possibly know about any of this?" Aunt Carol smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a chill down my spine. "I know about the DNA test, Ethan," she said, her voice calm and steady. "The one Olivia's father made you take before you married her. The one that revealed you were actually more closely related to the bride than a groom should be." Ethan's face drained of color, his body trembling with a mixture of shock and fear. Olivia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What are you talking about, Aunt Carol?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What does that mean?" "It means," Aunt Carol said, her gaze fixed on Ethan, her voice devoid of all emotion, "that Ethan is your half-brother, Olivia. Years ago, before she married your father, your mother had an affair. Ethan is the product of that affair, a secret that she kept hidden for years, a truth that your father only discovered a few weeks before the wedding. The threat to reveal it was the reason I was asked to fake a kidnapping, to take his place at the wedding." The hallway fell silent, the wedding festivities grinding to a halt. Olivia stood frozen her. "My friends, please subscribe to my channel, like the video and write a comment, and we begin. Part 1. The argument expanded. The rain hammered against the industrial-sized windows of our tiny, overpriced Brooklyn apartment, a relentless percussion that seemed determined to drown out any semblance of peace. The building, a converted warehouse in Bushwick, was supposed to be charming, with its exposed brick and lofty ceilings. But tonight, it felt more like a concrete tomb, amplifying the echoes of our escalating argument. I loved this apartment when we'd first moved in, but now it felt like an awful reminder. Liam and I had been at each other's throats for hours, a low, simmering argument that had finally erupted into a volcanic eruption of pent-up frustration. It had started, predictably, with something ridiculously trivial, whose turn it was to take out the overflowing mountain of takeout containers and coffee grounds that constituted our shared existence. We argued about everything like that these days. But the trash was just the spark. It quickly ignited a much deeper fire, a conflagration of long-simmering grievances and unspoken resentments that had been festering beneath the surface of our relationship for months. I accused him of being emotionally unavailable, of retreating into his music, of spending more time with his bandmates than with me, his girlfriend of 5 years. It felt like I was always putting in more effort than he was. He always had time for his friends, his band, his hobbies, but never really seemed to make the same amount of time for me. He countered, his voice rising with each syllable, accusing me of being controlling, of stifling his artistic freedom, of not supporting his dreams. "You don't get it, Sarah. You never have," he'd shouted, his eyes blazing with a fire I hadn't seen in a long time, a fire that used to be reserved for his music, but was now aimed squarely at me. The air crackled with a palpable tension, thick enough to choke on. The scent of stale coffee and unwashed dishes hung heavy in the air, a testament to our increasingly chaotic lives. I felt a familiar tightening in my chest, a knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach. It was a feeling I knew all too well, a sense of impending doom that had become a constant companion in our relationship over the past year. We were circling the drain, spiraling towards an inevitable end, and we both knew it, even if we refused to acknowledge it aloud. And then he said it. The words that shattered the fragile remnants of our shared life, like a sledgehammer to a stained glass window. I heard him say he would never be with me again, so I left. He didn't yell it, didn't scream it, didn't even look particularly upset when he said it. In fact, his tone was almost casual, detached, as if he were stating a simple, undeniable fact of life, like the sky was blue or the earth was round. He didn't even meet my gaze, his attention fixed on the rain-streaked window, his silhouette outlined against the flickering neon glow of the bodega across the street. His words were like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me. A wave of numbness washed over me, quickly followed by a sharp, searing pain that ripped through my chest, leaving me gasping for breath. My world tilted on its axis, the familiar landscape of our life together suddenly crumbling into dust. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, staring into an abyss of uncertainty. I couldn't speak, couldn't form a coherent sentence. My throat tightened, constricting around the lump of unshed tears that threatened to choke me. I just turned and walked away, instinctively fleeing the suffocating confines of our apartment, the oppressive weight of his casual cruelty pressing down on me, stealing my breath. I grabbed my worn leather jacket, the keys to my vintage Vespa, and bolted out the door, leaving him standing there in the rain-streaked silence. I didn't know where I was going, didn't have a plan, didn't even care. I just knew I had to escape. I needed to put as much distance as possible between myself and him, between myself and the wreckage of our failed relationship. I needed to breathe, to think, to figure out how to pick up the pieces of my shattered heart. All I knew was that leaving was the only option left. Part 2. The discovery expanded. The rain was a relentless curtain as I sped through the streets of Brooklyn on my Vespa, the cold wind whipping at my face, doing little to quell the heat of humiliation that burned in my cheeks. Each passing block felt like another step further away from Liam, another attempt to erase the image of his detached face and the sound of his damning words. Finally, I pulled over to a curb on Avenue A in the East Village, the vibrant energy of the neighborhood a stark contrast to the suffocating gloom I felt inside. I stumbled into a dive bar called the Starlight Lounge, a dimly lit, perpetually hazy establishment where the air hung thick with the scent of stale beer, cheap cigarettes, and forgotten dreams. The red vinyl booths were worn and cracked. The jukebox was perpetually stuck on a bluesy lament, and the bartender, a grizzled man with a face like a road map, didn't ask questions. It was exactly what I needed, a place where anonymity was guaranteed and judgment was scarce. I slid into a corner booth, seeking the refuge of shadows, and signaled to the bartender for a whiskey neat. The burn of the liquor was a welcome distraction, a temporary anesthetic for the gaping wound in my heart. I nursed the drink slowly, watching the blurry faces around me, the cast of characters who populated the Starlight Lounge, the lonely regulars nursing their sorrows, the boisterous groups of friends laughing too loudly, the young lovers locked in their own little world. Everyone here had a story, a secret, a reason for seeking solace in the bottom of a glass. As the whiskey warmed my insides, the numbness began to wear off, replaced by a wave of raw, unfiltered pain. The image of Liam's face, his apathetic expression as he uttered those devastating words, replayed in my head, a broken record stuck on repeat. He would never be with me again. What did that even mean? Was he already planning a future without me? Was there someone else waiting in the wings? Had I been so oblivious to the signs? The thought gnawed at me, a burning suspicion that I couldn't ignore, a seed of doubt that quickly sprouted into a full-blown obsession. We'd been together for 5 years, a significant chunk of my adult life. We'd shared so much. Laughter, tears, secrets, dreams. I thought I knew him inside and out, but maybe I didn't. Maybe I'd been too blind, too trusting, too caught up in my own world to see what was really happening right under my nose. I replayed our last few months together in my mind, searching for clues, for red flags that I had missed. The late nights at the studio, the vague excuses, the increasingly strained silences between us. Had I been so consumed by my own insecurities and anxieties that I had failed to notice the subtle signs of his detachment? The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that there had to be someone else. He wouldn't just casually throw away 5 years of his life without a compelling reason. The never be with me again had to mean something, and it likely wasn't just a desire for more alone time. Fueled by a potent cocktail of whiskey, wounded pride, and a desperate need for answers, I did something I knew I would likely regret. Something that went against every fiber of my being. I pulled out my phone, took a deep breath, and logged into his email account. I know. It was a terrible thing to do, a gross violation of privacy, a betrayal of trust. But I was desperate. My heart was breaking, my world was crumbling, and I felt like I was drowning in a sea of uncertainty. I needed to know the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. I told myself it was the only way I could move on. My fingers trembled as I typed in his password, a password I had memorized years ago, a password that now felt like a key to Pandora's box. I held my breath and hit enter, bracing myself for whatever horrors I might find lurking in the depths of his inbox. This was where things would either become more manageable, or everything would fall apart even worse than they already were. Part 3. The confrontation expanded. The ride back to the apartment felt like an eternity, each passing minute amplifying the dread that gnawed at my insides. The gray morning light cast long, ominous shadows across the Brooklyn landscape, mirroring the darkness that had settled over my soul. My hands were still shaking as I parked the Vespa outside our building, the image of the emails searing itself into my memory. As I climbed the creaky stairs to our apartment, the familiar sounds of the city, the distant sirens, the rumble of the subway, the murmur of early morning conversations seemed muted, distant. The only sound that registered was the pounding of my heart, a frantic drumbeat echoing in my ears. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the smell of stale beer and unwashed laundry hitting me like a punch. The apartment was a disaster zone, a testament to the chaos of the previous night's argument and Liam's general lack of domestic skills. Crumpled takeout containers littered the coffee table, empty beer cans were scattered across the floor, and a thick layer of dust coated every surface. It felt like a reflection of our relationship, messy, neglected, and falling apart. Liam was asleep on the couch, sprawled out in a tangled mess of blankets and pillows. He looked younger, more vulnerable, without the weight of his responsibilities and his carefully constructed facade. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, a flicker of the love I once felt for him. But the memory of Olivia's emails, the image of their intimate exchanges, quickly extinguished that flicker, replacing it with a burning rage. I stood over him for a moment, watching him sleep, wrestling with the conflicting emotions that raged inside me. Part of me wanted to shake him awake, to scream at him, to demand an explanation. Part of me wanted to simply walk away, to erase him from my life without a word. But I knew I couldn't do that. I needed to confront him, to hear him admit the truth, to understand how he could have betrayed me so callously. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the inevitable confrontation. My voice was cold, steely, devoid of any emotion. "Who's Olivia?" I asked, not bothering with pleasantries, not allowing myself to betray even a hint of vulnerability. He stirred, blinking sleepily, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Olivia? What are you talking about, Sarah?" He sat up, rubbing his eyes, his voice groggy and disoriented. "Don't play dumb, Liam," I said, my voice rising with each word. I reached into my bag and pulled out the printout of the email exchange, the evidence of his infidelity, and threw it at him, the pages fluttering down onto his lap. "I know everything. I saw the emails." His face paled, the color draining from his cheeks. He stammered, trying to deny it, to deflect, to concoct some flimsy excuse. "Sarah, I can explain. It's not what you think." But the evidence was irrefutable. The words were right there in black and white, the confessions of his secret affair, the intimate details of their clandestine meetings. He had been cheating on me, lying to me, betraying me for months. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he said, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes downcast, refusing to meet my gaze. "It just happened. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." "It didn't mean anything?" I repeated, my voice rising again, cracking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "How could you do this to me? How could you throw away everything we built? 5 years, Liam. 5 years of my life, and you just tossed it away like it was nothing." He had no answer. He just sat there, hunched over on the couch, staring at the floor, a pathetic excuse for a man, a shadow of the person I thought I knew. The Liam I thought I knew was gone. This was someone completely different. The room was silent, save for the sound of my ragged breathing and the distant hum of the city. The air hung heavy with unspoken words, with the weight of betrayal, with the wreckage of our shattered dreams. I turned away, unable to bear the sight of him any longer. The tears began to flow freely, a torrent of grief and rage washing over me. I had to get out of there, to escape the suffocating confines of the apartment, to find some way to salvage what was left of my life. Part 4. The revelation expanded. The apartment felt like a cage, a gilded prison filled with the ghosts of our shared memories. Every object, every photograph, every piece of furniture was a painful reminder of what we had lost, of the future that would never be. I needed to escape, to sever all ties with this place and the man who had shattered my heart. I moved with a frantic energy, driven by a desperate need to reclaim my life, to regain control of my narrative. I packed my bags, throwing my clothes and belongings into suitcases with a fury, my movements jerky and uncoordinated. I didn't bother folding anything, didn't care about wrinkles or organization. All I cared about was getting out, leaving this place behind me as quickly as possible. Each item I packed sparked a new wave of memories, a fresh surge of grief. The worn leather jacket I had bought on our first trip to Europe, the concert t-shirt from our favorite band, the hand-knitted scarf his grandmother had made for me. Each object was a testament to the love we had once shared, a love that now felt like a cruel illusion. As I packed, my emotions shifted and swirled, a turbulent storm of anger, sadness, resentment, and a lingering sense of disbelief. One moment, I was consumed by a white-hot rage, imagining all the ways I could make Liam pay for his betrayal. The next moment, I was overcome by a wave of crushing sadness, mourning the loss of our relationship, the death of our dreams. And then, just as quickly, I would find myself numb, detached, as if I were watching my own life unfold from a distance. I didn't want anything to do with him, with this apartment, with this life we had built together. It was all tainted now, poisoned by his lies, irrevocably damaged by his betrayal. I wanted to erase him from my memory, to start over, to create a new life for myself, free from the pain and disappointment he had inflicted upon me. As I was zipping up my last suitcase, ready to make my escape, I noticed something on the coffee table. A small velvet box. It was nestled among the scattered beer cans and crumpled takeout containers, an incongruous object of elegance and refinement amidst the surrounding squalor. Curiosity, despite myself, got the better of me. I picked it up, my fingers trembling, a strange premonition gripping my heart. The box was a deep, rich blue, the kind usually reserved for fine jewelry. My breath caught in my throat. Inside, nestled against a bed of satin, there was a diamond ring. A beautiful, sparkling ring, a solitaire diamond set in a delicate platinum band. It was stunning, breathtaking, the kind of ring you dream of receiving from the person you love. He was going to propose. After months of cheating, after telling me he would never be with me again, he was planning to ask me to marry him. The hypocrisy was staggering, the audacity beyond comprehension. It was like a cruel joke, a twisted parody of romance. But then I noticed something else. A small, folded note tucked inside the box, nestled beside the ring. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest, unsure if I could bear to face another blow. But I knew I had to know. I had to see the full extent of his deception. I unfolded the note, my hands trembling uncontrollably, the paper crinkling in my grasp. Part 5. The twist expanded. The note was written on a small, cream-colored card, the elegant script unmistakable, Liam's handwriting. But it wasn't addressed to me. The words jumped out at me, mocking me with their blatant disregard. My dearest Olivia. A wave of nausea washed over me, a sickening realization dawning in my mind. He wasn't going to propose to me. The ring wasn't for me. It was for her. Olivia. That's what "he would never be with me again" truly meant. He wasn't just planning to leave me. He was already planning his future, his forever, with someone else. The note continued, the words twisting the knife in my already wounded heart. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you, my love. You make me happier than I ever thought possible. Will you marry me? He never said those words to me, not once in our 5 years together. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, the floor tilting beneath my feet. He had planned it all. The affair, the breakup, the proposal. It was all a carefully orchestrated performance, a cruel and calculated act of betrayal. He had been leading a double life, weaving a web of lies and deceit, and I had been completely oblivious, a naive pawn in his twisted game. But why had he left the ring and the note at our apartment? Why not at Olivia's? It made no sense. Unless... Then, like a lightning bolt, the truth struck me with brutal clarity. He wasn't going to break up with me before he proposed to Olivia. He was planning on ending things with me after he had secured her commitment, after he had the ring on her finger. He wanted to have his cake and eat it too. He needed me gone so he could start his new life with her without me knowing the exact truth. He knew I was a good person, and he used that against me. A sickening understanding settled over me. He was terrified, convinced that I would react badly, that I wouldn't let him go easily. That's why he had been so evasive, so distant, so careful to avoid any direct confrontation. He had likely painted me to Olivia as some sort of crazy, obsessive girlfriend, someone who would make his life a living hell if he dared to leave. A slow, sardonic smile spread across my face. He thought he had everything figured out, that he was in complete control of the situation. But he didn't know me at all. He underestimated my strength, my resilience, my capacity for righteous anger. He thought he knew me, but I was someone completely different than who I pretended to be. All I wanted was to be happy, and he was never going to give me that happiness. I needed to take it for myself. I closed the velvet box, the weight of it feeling oddly satisfying in my hand. I slipped it into my purse alongside my wallet and keys, as if it were just another everyday item. A power surged through my veins, a sense of newfound agency and determination. I wouldn't let him define me, wouldn't let him dictate my future. I was done playing the victim. It was time to take control of my own narrative. I walked out of the apartment, leaving my suitcases behind. I didn't need them. I didn't need any reminders of the life I was leaving behind. As I walked, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I never saw Liam again, nor did I seek him out. He was dead to me, a chapter in my life that was firmly closed. I moved on, rebuilt my life, and found happiness in unexpected places. I'm happily married now, to a kind, intelligent, and supportive man who cherishes me for who I am. He may not be who I initially expected to be with, but he's more than I ever could have asked for. And although not to him, I did have the chance to marry an even greater man. We had a beautiful wedding a few years later, one that the original receiver of the ring didn't attend. After a few months had passed after my departure, after I had healed and regained my sense of self, I did what any self-respecting woman with a penchant for justice would do. I used a burner phone to give Olivia an anonymous phone call, telling her everything. I detailed the affair, the lies, the note, and the carefully orchestrated plan Liam had concocted. I painted a vivid picture of the man she was about to marry, revealing his true character, his capacity for deceit and manipulation. The weight was lifted off my chest, and I felt a great amount of relief. I was never contacted by either of them again. I can only imagine the fallout, the recriminations, the shattered trust. I don't know if Olivia ever forgave Liam, or if they eventually made it down the aisle. And frankly, I don't care. Their story was no longer my concern. The final twist? The man I was eventually to marry, the one I did marry, was his best friend. He was Liam's best man at their wedding, and once he found out what Liam did to me, he helped put everything in motion to catch him. He confessed all of this to me after we began dating, and I knew he was the one I was to spend the rest of my life with. My life is full of love, laughter, and happiness, and I owe it all to the day I walked away from Liam and his lies, all his secrets,